Good afternoon. Kurt, we good? Good afternoon, and welcome to the Lawrence City Commission meeting. We'll start our meeting today with a presentation from Haskell Indian Nations University regarding the Keeping Legends Alive event on September 21st and 22nd.
Thank you for putting me on the agenda tonight. My name is Jancita Warrington. I am the director of the Haskell Cultural Center and Museum and also the event coordinator for the Keeping Legends Alive. I am Menominee on my dad's side and Potawatomi and Ho-Chunk on my mom's side, and I am both an undergraduate alumni of the Haskell Indian Nations University, and I have 2 graduate degrees from the University of Kansas. In October of 1926, the largest event in the history of Lawrence occurred on the Haskell campus. The very first World War I memorial in the United States and the Haskell Stadium were both dedicated. Tribal and non-tribal people from across the country came to attend. The city and the community of Lawrence partnered to make this legendary history. Our population here in Lawrence was 13,000 at the time, and over a 4-day period, we had 200,000 plus people come into Lawrence, Kansas, making this the largest event in our history. The funding came exclusively from tribal people, and the Haskell Stadium and Arch established a future historic landmark in this community. The first night game in KU's history was played October 2nd, 1931, with the Haskell Stadium lights that the athletic director, Fog Allen, borrowed from Haskell and installed at KU Memorial Stadium. For the next 88 years, the stadium became home to our local high school team, and the tenacious football legacy continued as they earned 36 state football championships for our Lawrence community. This year marks the 100-year anniversary of the end of World War I. So to commemorate this history, on September 21st and 22nd, we are hosting the Keeping Legends Alive event. This event is in honor of all veterans who served in all branches of the United States military. It also honors the amazing story of the Haskell football team and the collaborations between the city and Lawrence that made this 1926 event possible. We would like to officially invite and welcome the City Commission and all the citizens of both the city and the county here to join us on this great weekend to collaborate and enjoy and learn and celebrate this rich history of our community and the Haskell Stadium that has been home to the entire Lawrence community at various periods of time. We have kids and family events, as well as historical and traditional workshops, athletic events, historical tours, and a powwow that will engage our community in this rich history. The entire event is free and open to the public. Each day's schedule of events can be found at keepinglegendsalive.com. Explore Lawrence has also and continues to be a terrific partner, so information and links can also be found on Unmistakably Lawrence website as well. On Friday the 21st, we'll be hosting a Veterans Honoring in the morning, followed by a traditional feed, and then we will have one historic tour of the 6 war memorials on the Haskell campus. That evening, along with our partners at the Free State Festival, we will be showing the movie Man Killer at the Haskell Auditorium and then having a Q&A with the director, Valerie Redhorse, thereafter. On Saturday the 22nd, the educational workshops, family events, powwow, athletic activities will be held to celebrate this historic time and event. For these, we welcome everybody. These events will be held on the campus and in the stadium. We truly hope that all who have memories of their time spent at this historic place, as well as those who would like to make new memories, will come and create the next chapter in this legendary history for Lawrence. Finally, in the spirit of collaboration that made the 1926 event possible, we have received an outpouring of support, including all those listed on the official poster and the website. However, in particular, contributions include those from the Lead Center, the Spencer Museum of Art, the Free State Festival, the Dole Center, the Watkins, the Only Good Indian LLC, among other community partners. Most notably, the City of Lawrence has been, and we hope will continue to be, a huge supporter of the event. As such, we cordially invite each and every one of you to actively participate and join in this celebration for our community. We hope to see you and your families, your friends at the Keeping Legends Alive event on September 21st and 22nd. Please visit, again, keepinglegendsalive.com for any information, updates, or details on the event. Miigwech, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you out there.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we'll turn to the consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that's been pulled off the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments, and we have a clock over here that will be able to help you track your time. So is there anything from the consent agenda that a member of the commission would like to pull?
Item 13.
13. Anything else? Is there anything that a member of the public would like to pull off of the consent agenda? Okay, I'd entertain a motion.
Move that we approve all items on the consent agenda minus item 13, including all claims.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Item 13.
Okay, I need to recuse myself from this, given the,
So this is for voting purposes?
for voting purposes only,
Okay.
so.
Are you the Larson and Larson?
Yeah, Larson. I don't own it, but,
Okay.
yeah, so.
Can I ask you a question before you leave? Do you currently have an interest in Larson and Associates?
I do not own them anymore, however,
Okay.
they're still making payments to me.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we have item number 13, which is to authorize the city manager to execute a Second Amendment license agreement permitting Larson Associations, Inc., a Kansas corporation, to install one additional monitoring well within the city's rights-of-way near the intersection of 23rd and Naismith Drive in order to assess possible groundwater and soil contamination in the area.
So moved.
We might want to have public comment.
Good call.
It's possible, I don't see a reason for staff presentation unless somebody on the commission wants to see it. Okay, with that, we'll open it up for public comment. Members of the public who wish to speak to the issue can come, tell us your name, state your address. You have 3 minutes.
Doesn't seem like a controversial item.
Doesn't seem like it, but I got to open it up. Okay, let's bring it back to the commission.
I move again.
Okay. We have,
Could we have more agendas? We're out.
can we get some staff help with that, please?
Thank you.
There are some being printed right now. Thank you, KT. So we have a motion from Commissioner Nanda.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Perhaps someone can get Commissioner Larson back for us. Okay. With that, we'll turn to public comment. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues except those scheduled on the consent agenda or regular agenda portions of the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments and questions to the commission. Again, this is general public comment for items that are not on the consent or regular agenda. So I'll open up for public comment for items that are not on the agenda tonight. You may speak if it's not, has nothing to do with the agenda items.
It's regarding the Queens Road.
That, I believe, is agenda item number 3, and we will have public comment on that issue after we start talking about that issue. This is for items that are not on the agenda, general public comment. Do we have anyone who'd like to speak to general public comment?
Hello, my name is Sarah Merriman. I live at 6212 West 22nd Court. For the last few commission meetings, Donna Giesler and I have become regular attendees. We came here seeking help with a problem that exists with regard to our property at 812 Ohio, a problem caused by the city. The city has a large stormwater line underneath our house, and the city has told us that because of the sewer line, we can't use our property the way we intended, to build a new home with a basement. The city does not have an easement for the storm sewer. There is no document on file in the public records warning people that the storm sewer is under the house. The storm sewer shouldn't be there. In short, the city is trespassing on our property, and we came here to get some help in resolving that problem. As citizens of Lawrence who like to think the best of people and of our city, our experience has been disappointing. We met with the city manager and city staff about the stormwater line. The city acknowledges that the sewer runs directly under our house and that it does not allow for us to improve the property the way we would otherwise be allowed to. The city also admits that the information about the sewer line is not recorded in the public records, where the title insurer could have discovered it before we purchased the property in 2017. We have learned that structure flooding at 8th and Ohio has been known to the Stormwater Department for the last 10 years, but nothing has been done to correct it. The fact that the Stormwater Master Plan was not implemented in the manner intended and appears to have been largely disregarded or substantially altered for at least 10 years is also a concern. We have now learned by reading the Jayhawk Watershed Report that the city staff made the decision to take no action to help us. The fact that the city staff is telling the city commissioners that no action will be taken to correct the city's trespass on our land is very disturbing. This leaves us with little choice as to how to proceed, how to deal with the trespass, how to deal with the taking of our land. We regret that the city has taken this course of action, or should I say inaction. We will not be back next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Statements that I'd like to address just quickly. I know that it's not normally the practice of staff to respond to public comment, but I think some of the statements today were, I'd just like to clear the record. First of all, the city was not trespassing. The stormwater line was constructed lawfully in 1911. It was an open and obvious use of the land at that time. And while we do not have a recorded easement document, we have a prescriptive easement. So I'll limit my comments to that. I know this is not the place to debate, but I just wanted to correct those inaccuracies.
Okay. Other public comment on issues that are not on the agenda tonight? Okay. We'll now move on to our regular agenda items. First item is to conduct a public hearing regarding a distance limitation waiver for Basil Leaf Cafe.
Good
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight, we have a distance limitation waiver hearing for the Basil Leaf Cafe. It is located at 616 West 9th Street. They were issued a distance limitation waiver on July 23rd in 2013, but the business is going through an ownership change, and the distance limitation waiver is non-transferable. So to be able to continue to serve alcohol at that location and to apply for the city and state licenses, we have to go through the process again. So we would conduct the hearing, and then our recommendation is that you grant the distance limitation waiver.
Okay, questions? Okay, I'd entertain a motion
We'll have to, oh, sorry.
to open the public hearing.
I would move that we open the public hearing.
That's right.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Vice Mayor Larson. All in favor to open the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye. The public hearing,
I have one favor to ask. I think I speak for a number of us, or maybe a little hard of hearing. If people could speak into the microphones, including yourself, a little more closely, we
Okay.
can hear it better.
okay.
Thank you.
So the public hearing is open for the Basil Leaf Cafe. Any comment from the public on this issue? I'd entertain a motion.
Move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Vice Mayor Larson to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Back to the commission.
I'm fine with this.
Yeah,
it's
none of the
just a transfer.
circumstances have changed other than ownership.
Okay?
I would move that we find the proximity of the sale of alcohol by Basil Leaf Cafe is not adverse to the public welfare of safety and grant a distance limitation waiver.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Second issue. Hello, Mark.
Mayor, Commissioners, Mark Teal with the MSO Department. Tonight, you
Mark,
have,
can I get you to speak a little bit more?
Sure.
Thanks.
normally don't have that problem.
Can you, is it up as high as it goes? It's on the, your right.
Right there.
It may be up as high as it goes.
I don't think it is.
Oh, I see, I get it.
Okay.
That's as high as it goes. I'll try to.
There you go.
Tonight's item number 2 is regarding a distance limitation waiver for Lawrence Arts Center's Fall Arts and Craft fundraiser. You'll need to conduct a public hearing and find that the proximity of the temporary sale, possession, and consumption of alcohol related to the event will not impact public, and then also adopt on first reading ordinance number 9556 allowing the sale, possession, and consumption of alcohol. There's a representative from the Arts Center here if you have questions about the event.
Questions for Mark? Okay. I'd entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Vice Mayor Larson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. The public hearing is open on the Arts Center Fall Fundraiser. Any comment from the public?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Margaret Weisbrod Morris. I'm the new CEO at the Lawrence Arts Center. This fall fundraiser is for our education programs. We give out over $140,000 a year in financial aid, and this is a fundraiser that goes towards helping us do that. So if you have any questions for me, I'm here.
Questions for Margaret?
How many years have you been doing this, Margaret? Do you know?
That's a good question. It's been in a bunch of different iterations over the years. This is the first time it's a block party. In the past, it's been kind of a high-ticket dinner, and this year we decided we wanted to open it up and make it more of a neighborhood celebration so that people can see the building, we can talk about what we're doing, meet some of the artists in our programs, and just really have it be more of an open neighborhood kind of feel.
Thank you.
The time on this, on our ordinance, is from 12 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Is that when you're doing it, or?
We're not going to be doing it for 10 hours. At least I hope not. It's going to start at 5 o'clock, and it's going to start with some, we have Chuck Mead playing and the Kansas City Bear Fighters, and then another band to be determined. We're still waiting to hear. And then we'll have some other things going along with it, with some craft beer and other activities.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good luck with it.
Thanks.
Okay, any other public comment on the Lawrence Arts Center Fall Fundraiser? I'd entertain a motion.
Move to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Vice Mayor Larson. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, back to the commission.
I would move that we find the proximity of the temporary sale of alcoholic liquor for the event is not adverse to the public welfare or safety and grant a distance limitation waiver, and adopt on first reading ordinance number 9556 allowing for the sale, possession, and consumption of alcohol in the public right-of-way in the 900 block of New Hampshire Street on Saturday, October 20th from 12 p.m. to 11:30 p.m.
Thank you, Matthew. We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert,
Second.
second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Our next issue is consider adopting resolution number 7263. Chuck?
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. Chuck Souls with the MSO. I will attempt to speak up. Is that better? Okay. I was just introducing myself.
This is Chuck Souls.
I'm Chuck Souls. I'm with the MSO, Municipal Services and Operations Department. Let me get this started. This is probably the main event tonight, so I will speak up and try and be clear. And if people do have problems hearing me, please let me know, because we want to make sure everybody hears what's going on. I first want to start out with maybe some background on how benefit districts and why benefit districts. So new subdivisions and multi-dwelling unit projects rarely create enough demand by themselves to require the building of all streets in a street network. Therefore, new developments are often required to only build streets that are necessary to provide access, but with the understanding that improvements for that development will need to contribute to the greater street network as developments accumulate and greater demand is placed on the surrounding network. When enough development in an area triggers the need to complete the street network, those streets can be constructed with benefit district financing. And the developments approved. Still? Okay. Is that better? Okay. So when enough development in an area triggers the need to complete the street.
We didn't hear anything from the beginning. I did.
Okay. Let's go one more time. New subdivisions and multi-unit projects rarely create enough demand by themselves to require the building of all streets in a street network necessary to support them as a new area of the city urbanizes. Therefore, new developments are often required only to build the streets necessary to provide access, but with the understanding that the development will need to contribute to the greater street network as developments accumulate and greater demand is placed on the surrounding network. When enough development in an area triggers the need to complete the street network, those streets can be constructed with benefit district financing, and all developments approved over time then contribute to completing the street network. Much of Lawrence has developed in this fashion given the history of developing new areas in smaller pieces. In this sense, Queens Road is not unique. Development in the vicinity of Queens Road and along the related road network has persisted, and now the demand is very high to complete the construction. Queens Road is necessary to complete the street network in this area, to offer alternate transportation routes to properties in the area, as well as improve emergency access to properties in the area. So we've had this discussion a couple of times about Queens Road. In June of 2017, the City Commission held a public hearing on the establishment of a benefit district for Queens Road, After public comment, the City Commission deferred adoption of the resolution to create the benefit district, requesting staff to look at alternative methods of assessment and funding options. So then in May of 2018, staff provided the answers to a lot of questions that the public had back in June about the establishment of a benefit district, district alternative assessment methods, and other legal considerations. In May, the Commission directed staff to look at another option of expanding the benefit district boundaries. And tonight I will go over the three options that we've developed. Gina Rekoff with Gilmore and Bell is also here to answer any questions that the Commission or the public may have. So let's briefly go over the project once more. And we'll go over this a couple different times, but there are two benefit districts. There's the Queens Road Benefit District, which is the larger benefit district and probably what most people are here to discuss. It's the improvements on Queens Road from 6th Street to Eisenhower Drive. Typical street section, we're going to have basically a two-lane road. There will be a center turn lane where needed, or a median where a center turn lane isn't needed. There'll be on-street bike lanes, and there'll be a sidewalk on one side and a shared use path on the other side. Here's just basically the typical aerial view. We'll have a roundabout at the intersection of Overland Drive and Queens Road. There's an existing roundabout at the intersection of Wakarusa and Queens Road that was developed and paid for by the Links Development. The intersection improvements at 6th and Queens will include crosswalks and handicap accessibility and signalization. So I jumped ahead. Again, the intersection at 6th and Queens Road will have a new traffic signal, crosswalks, and accessibility. So again, there are two benefit districts. I don't know if that's clear to everybody, but there are two benefit districts. Queens Road, which is basically the construction of Queens Road from 6th Street to Eisenhower, sidewalk, bike lanes. The method of assessment is square footage of the lot or property. The estimated cost is approximately $4.8 million. And then the second benefit district is 6th and Queens Road, the intersection improvements, which are the crosswalks, the signalization. Again, the method of assessment is square footage, and the estimated cost is about $450,000. So option one was presented to the City Commission back in May, and option one basically had these two maps as the benefit district areas. Queens Road was everything north of 6th Street, and the signal at 6th and Queens Road included a section south of 6th Street that would take benefit from the intersection improvements. Everybody in the benefit district for Queens Road, if you benefit from Queens Road, then you should benefit from the signalization at the intersection, as well as the people to the south. We've got a lot of calls from the people to the south of 6th Street that were concerned they would have to pay for Queens Road additionally, and that's not the case. They're only included in the benefit district for the signalization. So the apportionment of costs is 100% of the cost would be paid by the benefit district, except the city would pay for the additional width of the street for the bike lanes and the multi-use pass. One other thing I wanted to go over while we're on the option one, I'm going to have to use the Elmo. We'll go a little old school, if you want to call it that. I'm going to drag the mic around, so. So what I've done here is basically, and I'm going to have to go over this and explain it for everybody. So basically, the light blue, and it's underlaying, or it's underneath the overlay, but the light blue was the proposed benefit district for Queens Road, all the light blue that you see here. The overlay, basically, like this area here in green, are the areas that are included within the agreements not to protest that we have on file. And we wanted to make sure that everybody understood. I'm going to put these up here one by one just to show them. So we'll start with Area 1. Area 1 is this green area, and this is basically Westwood Hills area. And the area that's proposed to be in the benefit district was this eastern part of the Westwood Hills area. And that was entered into back in November of 2000, and it was for Queens Road. It was for a period of 30 years, and the agreement was intended to run with the land for that period of time. And at that time, and we know that there are a lot of new property owners, but at that time, John Bush was the owner of all the property, and the mayor was Jim Henry. Moving on, again, there's a light blue area that's underneath.
Chuck, would that agreement to not protest have shown up in a title search if I were to have bought a property in Westwood Hills?
It is filed with the Register of Deeds. Here's the book and page number. Oops, right there. So it would depend on I guess, the person who's doing your title search. I would assume it would be somewhere there, but it is filed with the Register of Deeds. So the second area was the number 2. Which one's number 2? We just got this done, and then the computer crashed downstairs, so we had to scramble to get it back up. Bear with me here. Well, we're going to go
Area
out.
2, Chuck, is just on the west side of Queens Road,
Is it
the
the pink
green.
area?
On the green.
There it is, the green.
The green.
All right, I just didn't see it. So this area here, which is commonly known at this point as the Kellen Addition. The Kellen Addition. Back when Mike Stoltz owned the property, again, he waived and relinquished any right to protest. Again, it was for a period of 30 years, and the agreement was intended to be a covenant running with the land. Again, it was filed with the Register of Deeds under the mayor, Mike Amex.
What was the date of that?
The date on this was 2006. We're moving south, and I don't know that this pertains as much, but we do have an agreement not to protest for Branchwood, which is south of 6th Street, which is Queens Road is extended. It was for the property here. This property, as it developed, was required to build and construct Branchwood, so I don't know that that's really pertinent, other than it also includes the agreement not to protest for the signalization of the intersection.
Chuck, is that the co-ops?
Yes, yes. All right, number 4. Number 4 is basically Park West.
What was the date on that, Branchwood?
This is 2008.
Okay. Thanks.
Park West, similarly, that's all the property here, kind of like in the pink, but it looks purple because the blue's over it, or under it. That was for Park West. I'm looking at this, and I want to make sure that people see it. Mike Stoltz was the owner at that time. Sue Hack was our mayor. Again, it was for 30 years. It was to run with the land. And you want a date? This was 2002.
Okay.
Number 5 is right here. This is an agreement with, again, it's just one lot of the Kellen Addition. It was August of 2015. Again, waives and relinquishes rights to protest the formation of benefit district, covenant running with the land. It was for Queens Road, and it was signed at that time by Tim Stoltz, who was the owner, and this was 2015. Area number 6 is...
Was that Mike Amix? Signed
What was that?
Was it Mike Amix that signed that in 2015?
That was Mike Amex, yes.
Okay.
Agreement number 6 is with the Lynx Development. We've actually has 3 agreements with the Lynx. They were signed in September of 2016. Again, it was for Queens Road and improvements at 6 and Queens Road. It was for 30 years. Um, And it was signed by the mayor at that time, Mike Amex, and the owner or managing partner, James Lindsay. And we've got a couple agreements with them for those 2 tracks. And then Overland Point, which is this little area right here. This was executed in 2004. Again, it was for Queens Road, a covenant to be run with the land for 30 years, signed by Mike Rundle and Roger Morningstar back in 2004. So just some information on the agreements that were filed not to protest benefit districts for Queens Road when those developments were done, going back to, like I stated earlier, when areas start developing, it's not uncommon that we don't get all the street networks developed. And we get these agreements not to protest from owners at that time that run with the land, because at some point in the future, they're going to need to participate in those costs. While although I absolutely understand everybody's points here that, you know, they didn't know about these benefit districts, they probably, when they bought their lot, or maybe when they bought their home from the developer, Queens Road not being constructed, probably those lots and those values that they purchased those homes with were at a discounted rate. If Queens Road would have been there, then maybe there would have been, those properties may have been valued higher for when they were bought or sold. So anyway, just some background. We've kind of gone over some of that previously, but I'm hoping this will come back now. Am I doing all right vocally? Okay. So that's option 1. Option 2, the City Commission asked us to look at an expanded benefit district area, which we've done. We've included everything from north of 6th Street, from George Williams Way, over here, to the west, all the way over to Wakarusa on the east, straight north to the city limits, and everybody in between. So the 2 hashed properties are the City of Lawrence properties. So the expanded benefit districts increase the area of option 1 by about 47%. It also includes 2 city properties for a total city participation, including the bike lanes and the multi-use paths, of $704,000, and that's for both benefit districts. The 6th and Queens Road intersection would include, again, that expanded Queens Road benefit district area, plus the same area that was out there before for the intersection improvements. Option 3 is basically the same benefit district area as option 1, but the city would be contributing additional funds equivalent to their participation in option 2, which was the option where the city owned 2 properties in the benefit district. So basically, option 3 is the same as option 1, except we're contributing $704,000 versus $350,000. This is probably a better table for everybody to kind of get those comparisons down. This is a comparison of the options for Queens Road. I want to also note that this is total amounts, and it's for Queens Road only. So the signalization is another benefit district that would have to be added to this. That benefit district's significantly less than the benefit district for Queens Road. So what I did here was I basically took some typical properties that we've been talking about, the Lynx, Walmart, the school district.
We don't have it and we can't read it. It's too small. Yeah.
Whoops. This was also provided in the commission's memo and is out there. It's on the web. I don't know how I can blow it up any. But I will say that the The residential lots that we're talking about are just a typical lot. It's not what, you know, everybody's going to get charged. Can you get it bigger? Oh, well.
You can scroll it around.
All right. Oh, great.
Move it around.
Yes.
Does that work?
Yeah, it's kind of big, though.
You want it smaller?
Well, you can't get too much. There, yeah. Is that all right? Is that better? Some technology. So option one was the option that we talked about originally. It's kind of hard now to get the comparison in there. Maybe it's close. So you can see like the links in option one was about 1.4 million. Option two, because we nearly doubled the size of option two, 40%, which would about half the cost for any of the properties at option one. So the links went from 1.4
Excuse me,
to.
Chuck. We want everybody to hear, so please keep the conversations down. If you need to speak, you can go outside. Everybody needs to be able to hear Chuck, okay? Thank you.
So like I was saying, the option one to two, option two is about 47, almost double the size. So as you would expect, the properties or the costs to the properties of option one were basically cut in half when you added in, when you looked at option two. And that's because we added a number of properties. You know, we added like the St. Margaret's, the Walmarts, the USD properties, the city properties, and additionally, we added more residential properties in Oregon Trail and in those areas. The residential properties, my hand, I don't know that my hand blew up any, but I'm right here where it says Block 2, Lot 15, Park West. That is just a lot that was chosen to provide an example. It does not mean that you're going to have to pay $3,400. It might be more, it might be less. It depends on the size of your lot, so it's based on the square footage. No magic to the one that I picked. I picked one just so people would have an idea of how these three options compare. So again, option 1 to 2 is about half. Option 1 to 3 is a little bit less, but the only difference between 1 and 3 is the city's contributing about $350,000 more. So that's what you would expect to see. So on option 1, the city would pay for the multi-use path and the additional width of the multi-use path and the bike lanes. And option 2, the city would pay for, obviously, the property that they've got included in the benefit district, plus the $350,000 for the bike path or bike lanes and multi-use path. These amounts are total. They are not per year for 10 years. So the $2,700 or the $4,300 is $430 a year for 10 years, plus or minus some interest. Interest for when we sell the bond. So it is not $4,300 a year for 10 years. It's $4,300 total divided over 10 years. Do we have questions on this?
Questions from the commission?
Porter may
for
have to
Chuck?
help me get back. How do I get back? Escape? Oh, okay. So, the commission's actions tonight is we're asking for direction on the formation of the 2 benefit districts. Queens Road from 6th Street north to Eisenhower, and the intersection improvements at Queens Road from 6th Street. Yeah, not from 6th Street, at 6th Street in Queens Road. And adopting the resolution 7263. We actually have 3 versions of the resolution. They will be 7263, version 1, 2, or 3, depending on the option. And then we will have another public hearing in October based on your direction this evening.
Chuck, can you go back to the option 1 map?
Mhm.
Okay. If I followed you, when you walked through, that's the same map that you had on the Elmo, correct? I mean, obviously it's colored differently, but it's the same.
Yes. The only thing was this one here, we went ahead and we put on the 6 in Queens Road Benefit District because we had this property right here.
Okay. So if I followed you correctly, as you were going through those non-protest agreements, We have 7 of them on file ranging from 2000 to 2016, and I believe it covers every property on option 1 with the exception of the 1677 East 1000 Road property. Is that correct?
Correct. They are outside the city
So,
limits.
given that that's the only property that we don't have a no protest for, why is that included in option 1?
So it's not the only property. Let me pull the Elmwood.
Hunter's Ridge also does not have an agreement.
So the agreement not to protest does not mean that you won't be included in a benefit district, but it means that the agreement is you won't protest the formation of a benefit district. So as you can see here, Hunter's Ridge does not have a agreement not to protest. I think this is a vacant tract, but this is option 1 was set up the way we typically done it. Basically, at the halfway point of the section, this side would pay for Queens Road, this side would pay for Congressional.
But is it typical in the development of a city special benefit district to include a property that is not in the city?
Not necessarily, but it's not unheard of. We did the same thing with Art Queen over on 25th and O'Connell. Actually, it was Franklin, 25th and Franklin. He owned a big tract of land at that time. That's the one that comes to mind. I think we've done a couple others, Commissioner. The road improvements will extend along the frontage of the property, and so there is a benefit to the property. So I guess I need to use the microphone. It will benefit the property from that perspective. We will tie in whatever driveway and storm sewer, and he'll have access there as well. We will maintain that road, the improvements, and I don't know where we've left the discussions with that property.
There's been discussion between the city attorney's office and the attorney for the owner of that property, and during those discussions, they decided they would like to stay in the county, but would want to be a part of the benefit district, and so we basically have reached an agreement regarding that, which just has to be reduced to writing and then signed. Matt Goff is the attorney for the owner.
Sorry to interrupt, but could you show an agreement not to protest or benefit district of any of the property?
So for benefit district number 2, it would be the same for Queens Road as what I'm showing.
It's the other side. The other side is 6th Street.
Yeah.
Doesn't that be-
We'll have a chance to have discussion and questions from the public.
I understand this isn't a question, it's a clarification.
Well, I mean, that is a question.
Did you show agreements not to protest?
The purple area has an agreement not to protest.
The purple area has an agreement not to
That's
protest.
the only one.
Thank you.
But it might, just for clarification, Mayor, obviously, the people south of 6th Street are not going to pay for Queens Road. We just want to make sure that's clear. I don't know if that's where the
The
gentleman's
benefit
question
district for.
was going.
That covers the properties south of 6th Street is simply for the signalization.
Correct.
Which is $450,000.
Correct.
Okay? So, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that clarification. What we'll do is we'll have questions from the commission, and then after that, we'll go to public comment. Okay? There may be other presentations besides
I
Chuck.
think that's all I had.
Okay.
We went over the last one, didn't we? Last slide?
Okay.
Yes. So,
Right.
we're providing your direction. We'd ask you to approve the Resolution 7236, establishing Tuesday, October 2nd for the public hearing to create the benefit districts.
Okay. Questions from the commission for Chuck?
I have a question. You said that those costs are levied over 10 years. Is it unheard of to do 15 or 20 years?
We have seen a benefit district or two. It's not typical. Unfortunately, Brian's not here, but
Chuck, speak up, please.
go ahead. I'll let Gina talk to that.
Right?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Gina Rekoff with Gilmore and Bell, the city's bond counsel. The city has done some benefit districts that have been levied over more than 10 years. I would say it's relatively uncommon. I couldn't give you a list of the districts that we've done over more than 10 years off the top of my head. We could definitely research that, though, and get back to you. I would say in the 15 years that I've worked with the city, a handful, maybe. I wouldn't say that, again, it's common.
It's just unusual, not necessarily rare, more unusual than rare.
Yes, that's correct. And I would say that that is a relatively standard practice in cities across Kansas that use benefit districts. Typically, assessments are levied over a 10-year period, mostly because, as you may be familiar with, when you issue bonds to finance the project, much like your own home mortgage, a 10-year bond issue carries a lower interest rate than a 20-year term. And usually on benefit districts, the annual assessments are manageable over a period of 10 years, but that's certainly something that cities consider in addition to the useful life of the assets that are being financed with the benefit district as well.
Is the interest passed on to the property owners, or does the city pay the additional interest?
No, the interest is passed on to property owners. So in Chuck's example, all of the numbers that he's put up on the screen today are just the principal amount of the special assessment. And so what the city does is the city will sell bonds. So for the signalization benefit district, let's take that, with a $450,000 cost. The city will issue bonds in the amount of $450,000. It'll get whatever interest rate it gets from investors when it has the competitive sale that it has on the bonds, and then it'll pass on that exact interest rate to the property owners. And so the property owners are essentially paying special assessments in exactly the amount that the city then remits to bondholders to pay the debt service on those bonds.
So the interest rate is determined at the time of sale, and it doesn't go up or down during the 10 or 20 years or whatever?
That's correct. The total interest cost is determined at the time the bonds are sold, and then what the city does is it takes that principal amount plus the total interest cost over the, say, 10-year period, divides literally by 10, and then that gives property owners certainty as to what they will see on their property tax bills each year during that 10-year period.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
I've got a few questions for Chuck. And during a May meeting, you had presented a map, this benefit district
Correct.
overlay map. I don't know if you've got access to that you could call that
Get
up.
it?
If you could, I'd appreciate it.
It may be partially up here already, but I'll go this way. Because I've been in here so many times today.
It's my standard pose,
Very thoughtful.
my prayer pose.
Nope. That one?
Okay, yeah, that one. And essentially, what this map shows is all the benefit districts that have been applied to the properties in that area. And the different colored designations are the number of assessments that they've been attached to the properties,
Correct.
depending on their location. So my question is that as we look at option 2, which you have explained, you've basically expanded the boundaries over to George Williams Way and then all the way over to Wakarusa. Is that my understanding?
Correct.
So my question then would be, we are asking for the folks on George Williams Way and like Stone Ridge and Congressional Drive to pay for Queens Road based on option 2. So did the folks on Queens Road, did they help pay for George Williams Way, Stone Ridge, or Congressional Drive?
No, no. That's what basically the numbers are for. You can kind of follow those numbers, 6661 and 7039 tells what the benefit district is, but essentially the people on both sides of George Williams Way, so it'd be this area here, I don't know why that keeps doing that, and this area over to Stone Ridge would have been in the benefit district for George Williams Way. The people that paid for Stone Ridge would have been basically between George Williams Way and Stone Ridge, and this is Hunter's Ridge. Half of Hunter's Ridge would pay for Stone Ridge. People on Queens would pick up half of Hunter's Ridge plus the Kellen addition. So it's basically cutting those sections in half, and half would go east and half would go west. So the people over here on Queens Road Benefit District and Park West and Westwood Hills did not participate in George Williams Way, Stone Ridge Drive, Congressional Drive, and they did participate. Some participated in Overland Drive to the south. It also works north and south. Most of them, if not all of them, paid for Wakarusa Drive, and then Queens Road would be the other collector street that area would participate in, just like all the other properties participated in, the adjacent collector streets as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Chuck?
In option number 3, where the city is paying a greater portion for the amount that they would have paid had option number 2 been selected, is that just an outright payment versus including them in that benefit district?
That would just be it wouldn't be a payment, it would be a reduction in the amount, but
Right.
same thing, yes.
Okay, thank
Yes. Option 2, we'd be able to pay ours just like anybody else paying bond payments. Option 3, we'd have to come up with the funds in advance.
you. Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Can I see your map? I want to see something.
Does the selection of the option dictate a start date?
Well, we could have started this year, but it'll probably be next summer, so we would probably start next summer. We would have plans and stuff. They're 90% developed.
Well, I just mean in terms of the city's increased involvement in the latter option. Is that, obviously, that's going to require...
Well, if you're talking the additional $350,000
Correct.
again, yeah, we'd have to take a look at budgets and see how we can do that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if what ultimately transpires there is that it gets bumped a budget year into the next budget discussion. I'm foreseeing option 3 potentially causing a 1-year delay in this project. Is that reasonable, or is that?
It would be nice to see Queens Road done. We'd have to have that discussion.
Sure, you might envision what that would translate to in terms of bond payments.
That's true, too. I mean, to Commissioner Ananda's question, I said we would have to fund that up front, but we would still be making the bond payments. So the bond payments at $350,000 additional, more than we have in the budget right now, would be like $35,000 a year.
Okay.
So it's not significant.
So it could be absorbed without delaying a start date.
We could do that.
Okay.
It really needs done, but I know
I
you know.
understand.
I know you know the condition, so I don't think anybody's going to object to that. But
Yeah, last question.
Sure, go
When
ahead.
what I was checking on there, Walmart, it looks like only paid for Overland and
oops.
Eisenhower. I guess my question is, actual Wakarusa Street between 6th Street and Queens, there was never a benefit district for that entire stretch of Wakarusa. That's just, the city took that project on. And pay for it 100%.
The state, when Sixth Street was expanded to the west from, I think we went from Folks all the way out to K10, the state built a lot of that Wakarusa from, yeah, it probably went almost to Overland. I don't think they quite got to Overland because you have that brick pattern, just like you do on West Sixth. And then they did even go south past the shopping center, because that's where you have the widening and the lanes come together. So the state paid for that with that project. And then Walmart has built the turn lanes. They've had some assessments on Overland Drive, Congressional. Obviously they paid their share of sewer charges and stuff like that.
I guess one of the things that when I was looking to expand the district from the last time we had that here was I felt like Walmart, being kind of a major retail center, should have to pay more for especially some of those major streets. And I considered Queens Road, kind of a major north-south street for them too, the Farmers Turnpike.
Sure.
So that's what I was looking for to achieve for that. So looking at that and, I guess seeing that the state really is the one that paid for Wakarusa.
For that section of Wakarusa, yeah.
And not necessarily,
I know
a lot
Bauer
of
Farms.
the businesses along
Bauer
there.
Farms put that cut in through
Yeah.
that median.
Yeah.
And they put in a turn lane, but it was really the state and those developments that, the state did that whole intersection. We did that intersection, the signals and stuff.
It's hard not to walk away thinking that the residents are paying more than commercial interests do in general. It's hard not to think that, because when the state pays it, obviously that's us.
Yeah.
That's still the residents, so that's more of a broader meta topic that I guess that we're not really looking for here, but that was my reasoning in expanding it, was I felt like Walmart should participate more in the district.
And option 2 provides Walmart as a property owner, but it kind of works against us because, the other commercial developments get reduced and we don't really see the increase in contribution from the new commercial developments that we're putting in to make up that difference.
Do we also have to be careful about my understanding is that the benefit districts do not depend on the property use, but the actual,
Correct.
just the square footage, so do we have to be careful about being arbitrary, apply that, because this is a big whatever, we have to be careful about that.
That's why I was saying it seems more like a meta topic where it seems like residents are paying more rather than commercial interests. Which I suppose is a topic we could try and have one day, but
We are bound by state law, I guess, right?
Other questions for Chuck?
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay?
Well,
thank
I'm
you.
not done. I
Nope.
just thought I'd
Okay,
wait.
sorry. Oh, you're just waiting, that's good.
I'd like to go back to those agreements that
Okay.
you showed to us. And just kind of see if I'm understanding the significance of those being attached to the property, to the land for 30 years. It seems like we've got a couple different ways we could fund these street projects. The first one would be that the developer would simply build the road, and then the cost of that would be applied to the lots. Is that something we do?
It could be.
Okay.
I mean,
I mean, do we have projects that are developed that way? Where the developer essentially,
Well, the developer pays for all the internal lots to the developments. Let me pull up the map here. I may have to ask Porter to show me how to do this again. How do we do this again, Porter? I just wanted to zoom in here so we could talk about, and I know people can't see that necessarily. So now I can just do this,
Yeah. Big enough?
maybe a little bigger. Control plus. broke. Okay, so,
Okay.
for example, the developer installed Brown Lane, North Carver, North Eaton. They installed all those.
So they built those streets.
They built those streets, and those costs were put in to the cost of the lot. They put in the sewer lines the same way, and the water
Okay.
lines. The issue is, and this is where we do the benefit districts, are on the Queens Roads, the Wakarusa Drives, the Congressionals, those collector-type streets where there's more than one development on
Okay.
either side of the road. So
Okay.
yes, you could have, if the developer was big enough, and we've had some of that, they built like 25th Street, which is a collector street out there, because they own both sides. A lot of times we don't have that. The other option would be to, and this isn't in our current policies, but we could exact a fee at time of plating for basically, you know, if they're going to have this much development, then this many dollars per running foot, and we could get that up front and put it in like a bank until
Okay.
we had enough to develop Queens Road.
Okay, well, if the developer went ahead and put the smaller roads in, and then at the same time the development was being done, the larger road, like Queens Road, was built, the specials would be on the properties at the
Already.
time that they're sold.
Right, and we've done a lot of that too.
Okay, so at that point, the cost is known to everybody because it's being assessed, it's being collected.
Right.
Okay. What we're faced with here is a situation where over a period of, 18 years, 15 years, something like that, instead of doing it that way, what we had was these agreements that there would be no contest of the special assessment district. And these agreements were filed at the county. They're on all the title searches. They're probably in the appraisals. So instead of having that cost known at that time, people essentially are on notice that they're going to be responsible for these costs. That's just not known how much that cost is known.
Correct.
So that would probably be factored into the cost of the lot at the
Right.
time the developer sells it.
Right.
So
And-
the developer would probably get less money on the sale of that lot, given the fact that there's this obligation with the property to pay the costs.
Right, and a lot of these have developed with, like Overland Drive was done with the benefit district, and there's people in Oregon Trail that are paying those assessments today. Same thing, Wakarusa Drive, I think people in Park West and Westwood Hills paid assessments for Wakarusa. If they would have had another assessment for Queens Road, whether it's now or in the future, those costs would have been borne by those properties at some point.
But the properties that have the agreements, essentially what they had was a notice
Right,
that there was going to be a cost, but it wasn't quantified.
but it wasn't, right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions for Chuck or for the attorney? Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay. Now we'll have public comment on this issue, which there are directions associated with the agenda, if you have a copy of the agenda. Essentially what you do is you come up, sign in, state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes. And please address your comments to the commission. Thank you. Let's wait until we have your turn at the microphone.
Very, very cool in here. It's like freezing in here. I don't know if I'm the only one. Really.
Welcome to our commission room.
Hello, I am Paulette Strong, and I am here representing St. Margaret's Church. I live at 1638 Illinois Street. St. Margaret's is located at 5700 West 6th Street. We have several church members in attendance as well in our audience. First of all, we thank you for the opportunity to speak publicly regarding our opposition to assessing St. Margaret's for the improvement of Queens Road. We appreciate your thoughtful consideration as you hear our comments. So let me just give some brief history to you. Early on, our church worked with Mike Wilgen, then city manager, and city staff to develop our property. And we also adhered to city building codes, even though we were not required at that time to do so. We developed an attractive church property along the undeveloped 6th Street corridor. We have worked positively over time with the city to set a high standard fitting of what we believe to be a progressive Lawrence. From 2001 to 2021, we will pay a total of $81,160 for being part of the Yankee Tank Sewage District. We support that assessment. From 2010 to 2020, we will pay a total of $116,540 for the intersection and the traffic light adjacent to and at the southeast corner of our property. We support this assessment. And we have a second speaker, please.
Sure.
My name's Ed Kramer. 603 North Wild Plum Court. I'm also here to represent St. Margaret's. And thank you for the opportunity to discuss this. I won't bore you by repeating anything that Paulette's already gone over, because I know there's a lot of people want to talk here. We're located roughly a quarter mile west of Queens Road, and our members flat out don't use Queens Road to access the church. We don't use Queens Road as an organization. Our access is off of basically 6th Street, Stone Ridge Drive. We're paying for part of that stoplight there. And again, we get a benefit from that, so we're happy to do it. Our argument is that we simply don't see where we're going to get any benefit whatsoever from the improvements to Queens Road. And just out of fairness, Queens Road owners are not paying for the stoplight that we're paying on. We don't feel we should be paying for that stoplight. We don't feel that's fair. We don't feel, it's fair that we pay for Queens Road. So we would ask you that, whatever you decide on here, that you do not include, St. Margaret's in that benefit district. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Other public comment? Yeah.
My name is D. John Schultz. I live at 5753 Chimney Rock Circle, which is one of the areas that is being considered to be added on. If I may, I'll read portions of an email that I sent to Mr. Souls. No way should the residents of Chimney Rock Circle or Oregon's Trail development be roped into supporting paying for the Queens Road Benefit District project for a number of reasons. First and foremost, we simply do not benefit in any fashion whatsoever from this, quote, benefit project. The folks in our area have both nearby George Williams Way and Stone Ridge Drive to access our developments, and Queens Road is far further east than any of us would ever need to get to 6th Street. You could bulldoze out Queens Road entirely and do away with it, and none of us in this area would miss it at all. To tell us honestly, what do you think we're benefiting from in our areas. There are no businesses or public properties whatsoever on Queens Road that would cause any of us to travel on Queens Road at any time. If you go north on it, it leads essentially to nowhere, the Farmers Road, and go south on it, and you get to 6th Street, which we can access more easily on other streets. You might as well be assessing us for a road that we don't use or need in East Lawrence. The only drivers who would be apt to use Queens Road are the people living in the big new apartment complexes and those who live in dwellings along Queens Road or the smaller streets that feed into it. These people, along with the, quote, big dollar developers, are the sole beneficiaries, in my opinion, of the benefit district, and they should be the people paying for it, certainly not us. We definitely should not be held accountable for the city's financial planning on this project, and in the end, the largest beneficiaries, the developers, are likely getting away with greatly reduced taxes and assessments, while the smaller homeowners in that neighborhood, many of us on fixed incomes, are left holding the bag. We all bought our properties in good faith, never being told that there was even a hint of a possibility that we would be scammed for a non-beneficial assessment, whether it is to be paid in 1 month or over the course of 10 years. And it doesn't matter whether the assessment is just $1 or $2,000. It is the principle of the matter.
Sir, your 3 minutes are up.
I'm sorry, have I gone over?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Don't forget your stuff up there.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Rich Federico. I live at 139 Earhart Circle. I appreciate your time to speak. I also live in a residence that is contemplated being included within this benefit district under option 2. Mayor, your questions at the end about, and I think there's an assumption that people who live in my neighborhood were on notice through title searches. I question that assumption, having recently bought my home in 2017, as to whether or not we were on notice is that assumption in the regular course of a title search. So to the extent your vote rests upon whether or not there was notice provided to the residents that will now be included, I think more information would be needed on that. I'm here to speak for my family only, although there are many of my neighbors who are here who have told me that they also object and oppose option 2 and bringing in other members of the residents. And Commissioner Larson, your questions I think were important as to the arbitrary nature of this expansion. You said that we have to be careful not to be arbitrary. And there's a good reason for that, because that word appears in the statute for special assessments, and also the Kansas Supreme Court many decades ago in 1976 in a case Davies versus the City of Lawrence, in which Lawrence lost the case based upon what the Supreme Court called an arbitrary nature of the Commission's plan to expand in that case for sidewalks. I think what I've heard here tonight about who's paid for what road in these communities is illustrative of an arbitrary nature, in that it's, as a policy matter, somewhat divisive to the community when we're sitting here arguing about whether or not this particular street should pay for this segment of the street and this other segment should not. I personally don't use Queens Road. My family doesn't use Queens Road. We're not going to benefit from this. We are happy to pay our share of taxes to improve roads in Lawrence. In fact, I think last year we voted in favor of the ballot measure for the 0.3% retail sales tax increase for capital improvements. But here, again, you're talking about not having notice been provided to pay for a road that we're not going to benefit from, and it looks to be somewhat completely arbitrary because, again, the notice requirement. My mother-in-law happens to live in another section of Westwood Hills where she was on notice. She is included in options 1, 2, and 3. I don't have standing to object again for her because in her deed and when it was transferred to her, she was clearly on notice that she'd be paying special assessments. I think people in those categories are in a different position than people like myself and my neighbors who are here. So I guess I would just ask, in consideration of what I think is a procedural motion before you as to versions 1, 2, and 3, that you not consider option 2, because I think that even assuming that or if you proceed with the assumption that's legal, I think you would take on litigation costs of that assumption, because it does appear to be completely arbitrary when there's really no showing at all that people who weren't on notice are going to benefit from a road that almost none of us are going to drive through, because, as the last gentleman said, it's just completely out of the way to which we're going. Thank you for your time and your service to the community.
I'd like to clarify one thing.
Yes.
Can somebody help me with whether or not Mr. Federico lives in an area that was covered by one of those agreements? Your address is?
139 Earhart?
He does not, if he was not in option 1. Is that
I
correct?
believe on option 2.
Right.
Okay, but I mean,
Yeah, 'cause those agreements were
the
for that.
agreements were all in option 1, and you live outside of option 1, so.
Are you in Westwood Hills?
Yes.
On the west side, or on the east side?
Yes.
That entire Westwood Hills area was included in that one agreement not to protest.
Okay, so, I mean, I think, you might want to check that title again, because I think there was.
As a realtor, I can tell you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to rely on our legals. I'm not going to debate with you, ma'am, you'll have your 3 minutes. I think our staff can provide that information.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree that's something that can be determined. I'm just saying
Yes.
we're proceeding on an assumption here this evening.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Mickey Stremmel. I live at 2533 East, 25th Place. I'm here as a realtor. I work for KW Integrity. I've sold a lot of homes in Westwood and a lot of homes in Oregon Trail, and I represent many people and homeowners here from the Oregon Trail subdivision. The first question I have is, what is the reason, and maybe I missed it, and if I did, I apologize, what's the reason for the expansion on and making this a different benefit district than how they typically work, where a benefit district would be those homeowners that were put on notice, and now why do we have to expand this one? I guess I don't understand why this one is being done this way. Can someone explain that to me? And I think a lot of people here want to know why.
I'd offer that to staff for a response.
I think there's just different options in front of you, Mayor, regarding the size and who is.
And I believe the commission requested alternatives at our meeting in May.
But why? Why would you need an alternative? Why wouldn't you do it the way it's typically done?
Again, I think, Mayor, that those are options that the commission has
Right.
before it.
Yeah.
None of them have been chosen yet.
I understand. I'm just asking why in this particular situation we've decided to expand it, when typically a benefit district is those houses that are along the way. Obviously, you guys had thought about it because you had notices given to all these people in place on their titles that they wouldn't protest, and that's the typical way it would be done. Those option 1 is the typical way it's done. Why all of a sudden is this one different and we need to expand it? I guess that's why I wanted to know. I still don't understand why. We're looking at the option 2 anyway, or 3.
I think that we were responding to the comments that we got from the folks who were in that proposed benefit district. And what we were doing is we were saying, is there another way to do this so that the costs aren't so high for them? And I mean, that's what I remember as being the genesis of this idea.
Gotcha.
Then
that brings me back to Oregon Trail and why I'm here, and I'm actually want to talk specifically why Oregon Trail, Chimney Rocks, and those areas shouldn't be involved. I don't know if you're aware, but those people already have paid and are paying for, depending upon how they purchased their lot, whether the specials were paid off at the time of purchase or they're paying over time, they paid for George Williams Way, they've paid for Overland Drive, Stone Ridge, and the roundabout. They're already paying, each homeowner, depending upon their size, on average, is already paying anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 in special assessments on every single one of those lots. No one's helping them pay for any other roads. No one on the other side of the streets is paying for those. But now you're going to ask these people to even pay more money. I don't care if it's $1. I don't care if it's 25 cents. I don't care if it's $2,000 or whatever your numbers were. I don't believe it is fair as a homeowner when they've already paid their share. None of them protested it. They all bought their lots. They knew what they were getting into, and now you're going to ask them to pay thousands of dollars more. And I am here just to let you know these people have already paid a lot of money. Please don't ask them to pay more money. I don't think that is fair to them at all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mayor, if I may really quick.
Sure.
I do recall some conversation around wanting to see what that district may look like expanded in order to include more of the commercial area of that district. And staff informed us at that time that that would include, you have to have all abutting property. And so we were interested in seeing what that looked like, and that's what we're looking at.
One of the problems is that we're not supposed to do it based on use, however.
Correct.
I mean, we're supposed to do it based on, and maybe we can get the council to come and help us with this question right now. I mean,
It is the commission's determination on this benefit district and the size. And we have in the past provided the commission options on benefit district sizes. Just most recently was probably at Six and Champion for the Signal. We proposed a benefit district, and the commission wanted to look at options, and we provided that, and we went with the expanded options for that benefit district. So it's not uncommon, and it is up to the commission's decision.
okay. And I would invite council to come up and talk to us about, the idea that we can include properties based on use, because I think that's something we need to clarify.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So as Commissioner Larson, Vice Mayor Larson mentioned earlier, there is Kansas law directly on point that you cannot consider the current use of the property when you're making a determination of benefit for the various improvements. So the general premise, and I think what Chuck was alluding to here a moment ago, was that it is a factual determination for this governing body to make as to what properties benefit from the Queens Road improvement and the signalization improvement. That is your factual determination to make, and that is your purview. You get to make those calls. However, within the guidelines of Kansas law, right? And so Kansas law says you cannot consider the current use of the property, whether it's commercial or residential or multifamily, or the amount of traffic that it generates. The idea is that the benefit inures to the specific land that is there without regard to the use, because tomorrow, the example I like to use is tomorrow a tornado could come. It could, change the structures that are on that piece of property, or, zoning could change tomorrow for that particular use of the property. And so that's why Kansas law generally says that you cannot consider the use of that property. It is merely if the property is benefited for any use at all, whether it's residential, commercial, multifamily, single family, et cetera, then you have to make a determination that that property is benefited. And if it is benefited, then you have to include it in the district boundaries. If it is not benefited, conversely, you may not include it in the benefit district boundaries. And as was alluded to, the governing body is granted wide discretion in making those decisions about whether a property is benefited or not for any particular use. And so you get to make those judgment calls so long as they're not arbitrary and capricious.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
We'll continue with public comment.
My name is Jim Allspaw. I live at 5606 Fort Laramie Court, and we are in the Overland Trails subdivision. We moved here 3 years ago, and I have been on Queens Road twice, primarily to go north just to see what was up there, to amuse myself. There's nothing up there. I have no reason to go north on Queens Road. I'm much closer to 6th Street, to George Williams Way, using Stone Ridge Drive, any of those. Queens Road does not affect us in that subdivision. The same thing is true of the Chimney Rock Circle. It has no value for us. The primary beneficiaries, quite simply, are the Lynx apartments. They exit right onto Queens, or they can jog over to George Williams Way, but they are the primary beneficiaries, pure and simple. And I appreciate your time and my allowing me to say this, but I'm an old man. I get confused. And right now, I'm confused because I can't make a lick of sense out of this. Thank you.
I'm getting applause as well. Oh, I'm Amy Hilt, and I newly purchased my home at 418 Fremont. I think I'm just going to echo what my neighbors have been saying, and Mickey as well. We're already paying in Oregon Trails and Chimney Rocks for 4. And so I think you were seeing that, correct? And I also understood by expanding, we might be able to grab Walmart. But I think when I looked at option 2 and I wasn't able to see it all completely, what actually happened was the Lynx, their responsibility got cut in half. And so I think by expanding to the residents to pick up the difference instead of wanting perhaps Walmart to do that, we actually reduced one of the biggest new developments that will benefit the most and cut their tax liability in half at the Lynx. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Sherry Gerling, and I live in Westwood Hills also, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but saying exactly what she just said regarding Walmart picking up part of it and taking the Lynx down, the only reason Queens Road, in my estimation, and many people in my neighborhood, needs to be developed is for the people at the Lynx. And we use Eisenhower to Overland, to Congressional, or we use Wakarusa to Eisenhower to get to our neighborhood. The only thing that it has done in my neighborhood that's noticeable, and it's just the very beginning, is the increased traffic on Wakarusa with the people going to the Lynx. Now, I do understand that when Queens Road is developed, that they hopefully will be using that versus Wakarusa, but we have no benefit whatsoever. Nobody uses Queens Road, just like they've all said. Never have. If we did, I think it would have already been developed by now. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm expanding also on these latest comments. I am a homeowner on Landon Court in Westwood Hills.
We need your name too, please.
I'm sorry, I'm Linda Wedman. We live, obviously, east of Queens Road, and I can say with no reservation that I, nor the majority of my neighbors, will use Queens Road with any frequency at all. The services in Lawrence that we use on a daily basis, shopping areas, schools, grocery stores, they are all to the east and south of Queens Road, and we have no reason to use it. It would basically mean going past our neighborhood and backtracking. There is a massive apartment complex. I believe it is approximately 842 units that's been built on Queens Road. Shouldn't it have been arranged that that property bear the brunt of the cost? At this point in time, they will be the main users of the road. After reviewing the options for the shared payment of the multi-million-dollar cost of Queens Road reconstruction, and if these are the only 3 options, then I believe that option 3 is the best one. This puts more of the responsibility on the city and its properties that will use Queens Road, the future police headquarters and the water tower, and less on the residential homeowners who will benefit from it the least, thus making number 3 the most proportionate choice. It is the city and some of the properties to the west of Queens Road that will benefit the most from this project. Those of us to the east of Queens Road will continue to use Wakarusa Drive to access our properties, as again, it makes no sense for us to drive past that road and use Queens Road to backtrack. It is my guess that soon enough, with the addition of nearly 900 apartment units rented out and Wakarusa Drive being continued on west of Queens Road to access them, we will soon enough be paying for improvements for Wakarusa Drive. At least that is a road that we will use. Doesn't the very name Benefit District imply that it should apply to those it benefits? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Hess. I live at 313 Campbell Drive, directly adjacent to Queens Road. By the way, for future programming, it's super loud out there, but inside here, the microphone gets barely, so I can see why there's been a little bit of a disparity. I want to use a phrase, and I hope it doesn't come off as haughty or anything, but it seems a little weak to me to rely on agreements not to protest as a basis of moving forward. We listened to that for a very long period of time. But what that kind of implies to me is, I think what we've heard from each person coming up, there's this absence of benefit. And I think if we got a nice list, like each one of these districts or each one of these neighborhoods that is supposed to be included, if we could articulate what is the benefit to them, then I don't think we'd have the resistance. I'm seeing some benefit to the links being over there, and my neighbors probably don't want me to say that, but I'm seeing some. And so, if I could be shown what that benefit is, I'm going to be agreeable. And if I don't see what that benefit is, then I think we're going to continue to have the turbulence. The person from the church earlier, mentioned here's 2 or 3 things that they're signed up for. They're paying. They don't disagree, right? Because they see what that benefit's going to be. So instead of like the city kind of going back and just coming up with these different things, I'd like to see them come back and say, hey, you live here, here's what you're going to get because this happens. To me, that seems like that would be the way to go. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Pat Miller. I live at 5249 Carson Drive, Carson Place, that is. I have a question that usually these special benefit districts, from what Chuck said, when they're formed after the houses are built, aren't they usually collector streets? All those streets that you mentioned are collector streets. You mentioned Stone Ridge, Congressional, George Williams, those are all congressional. And yet Queens Road is a minor arterial road. Well, in the first place, I don't understand why it's a minor arterial road. It, like people have said, it doesn't go anywhere and that's why I'm just kind of confused about that. People are saying they'll never use Queens Road. We never use Queens Road except out of curiosity. However, that roundabout at Queens Road and Overland Drive will be used. It is used. I walk my dog there a lot. That it's used, well, it's not a roundabout now, but it will be. And there's a lot of traffic there, and I can see that. If you drive 6th Street going east and west, I think you have 5 stoplights between George Williams and Wakarusa. Well, if you don't live on the other side of 6th, why wouldn't you just pop on down Overland Drive and miss every one of those stoplights, no stop signs? That makes sense to me. But the rest of doing Queens Road, I don't understand. I don't understand why it's classified as a minor arterial, except it goes to Farmers Turnpike, and there's a little church down there, and there's a couple houses, but none of those are in the district, and so they're not paying for it. I don't know, none of this really makes sense to me. It seems like it ought to be a citywide project because people all over the city will use this to access Sports Pavilion, Rock Chalk Park, the new LMH facility. They'll all be going Overland Drive, and it seems to me that it's not fair for just the people that live in that area to have to pay for it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ron Nags. I live at 808 Wheaton Drive.
And I guess my question is more to Mr. Solis. If I understand the benefit district assessment is based on square footage, is that correct? Does that square footage include parking lots?
You have to address your questions up here.
Okay. Does the square footage include parking lots? And if it's a multi-residential dwelling, does it include all the square footage of each level? If it's a 3-story building and it's got a 10,000 square foot footprint, is it 30,000 square foot that they would be assessed?
My understanding is, and staff can correct me, it's based on the square footage of the land. It's not based on the use.
Okay, so you're talking about the footprint only
Right.
of a multi-residential building?
Of the
Okay.
land, not the building.
The land.
The land,
Right.
okay, including the parking lot?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And that's per state law. We have to do it that way.
Other public comment?
I'm Kay Breda, and I'm back again. I live at 5101 Cody Court. It's in Westwood Hills. You've told me over and over I'm not here to protest because I can't. But I am here to give you some facts. If you start at 6th and Wakarusa and drive to Highway 10, there are already 4 roads parallel to Queens. You don't need Queens. If you also, as someone said, you already have 5 stoplights, you put in another. This is not traffic flow, this is emission control. So if you really want to know what to do with Queens Road, vacate it, make it a part of the golf course, because I don't want to drive it, because if people are going to hook their shots, I don't want to get hit with my car. But it is not a necessary road. If you, in your wisdom, decide it has to be built, it does not need to be a collector street, it does not need a parkway, it does not need a bike lane. Every single one of those 4 parallel roads already have those. And as everybody has said, who's going to ride a bike to nowhere? Thank you.
Thanks.
My name's John Blake. I live at 304 Fort Laramie Drive, which is in the Oregon Trail Edition. And I guess I would reiterate what everybody said, that there is no benefit to the Oregon Trail residents for this item. You know, I would like to bring back the comment about Walmart. Commissioner Soden suggested that she wanted to potentially spread the cost of this development on retail, but I would point out that the effort to do that has scooped in the school district. People already assessed multiple other assessments, 4, I believe, was what you showed, and a church. So I think you ought to consider that long and hard, please. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening.
Evening.
Let's see. Okay, my name is Chris Keston. My address is 905 Branchwood Drive. So I am on the south of 6th Street. So piggybacking on some of the questions in the direction of, is it too late to explore an option where the signal at 6th Street and Queens Road is not necessary? If there is no Queens Road that goes north, would we be able to explore a median in 6th Street instead of the signal? We could, as was mentioned, there are many lights on 6th Street, and helping the flow of that. If you take out the signal, then you would eliminate the ability to turn left. from either side of that, but that might help traffic flow. So if that's a viable option, could that be explored? And then, of course, that could help reduce costs on the north side of 6, reduce costs on the south side of 6. I would pose that question.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Let's see. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is John Imms. I live at 812 Fox Chase Court. So we would be affected by the signalization benefit district. I think we can all agree that the word benefit is unfortunate. I don't think you've had very many votes that people feel there's any benefit at all. It is a tax. Regarding the advantage of having a signal there, and more importantly, the advantage of having a connection from my side of the street to 6th Street. Personally, I feel there's very little benefit. It'll increase the traffic down through what are now quiet neighborhoods. Don't see a reason to have a flow of traffic off of 6th Street to those neighborhoods. They function quite well for the 10 plus years that I've lived there. Also regarding the emphasis put on the right to protest, I don't believe any of the properties, or most of them, you got one property in that area that has given up their right to protest. The rest of them still have that privilege. Thank you.
Thank you.
Craig Chappell, 309 Campbell Drive, backing up to Queens Road with no driveway access to Queens Road. Our driveways are on Campbell. My concern, I have two concerns. One is that I think the cost is somewhat high. I've mentioned this on 2 other occasions, and there are a good number of us who would love to see the sidewalk on the east side eliminated right now, if not yesterday. And we already have the inclusion of one cul-de-sac. It's built and it's open and it's going out to Sports Pavilion, Lawrence, that area. And that seems to be working pretty well. I'm not sure we need another roundabout, but if that could be eliminated, that would lower the cost for everybody, regardless of which option you end up voting for. And the overall lesson is that if people want a benefit district, they have been known to form one themselves through the petitioning process. I've been involved in one of those. The first attempt in another city. The first attempt failed, the second one passed. And there was a contention in both cases, but the improved road in the case of the successful benefit district, although it cost $10,000, spread over 10 years for my family, seemed to be really a good thing for the whole neighborhood. And it sure improved traffic and safety. There are those considerations, I know. But I would encourage the residents of the city of Lawrence to form their own benefit districts to fight for these things if they really want them. And in this case, we don't have anybody here who wants the district to begin with. So now that we seem to be capriciously stuck with it, it would only make sense to me that we lower the cost. It's the sensible thing to do, and it's the right thing to do, and I hope you do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm Kevin Lose. I live at 913 Stone Creek Drive, which is actually on the south side. And if it's necessary, we are more than willing to pay for the benefit district for the light. But I do want to make a comment. Having lived out there since 2003, we've seen pretty much the entire development go on. And I think one option that potentially isn't on the table as I'm kind of listening to everything and thinking about the uses out there and what I see driving every day is actually, would you ever consider a smaller benefit district? And the reason is, I drive every day to work. I come home every day. I see George Williams. I see Stone Ridge. I even see Queens Road, even down to Congressional. And there's literally not more than a couple cars at each light when I'm leaving my neighborhood. So I have no less than probably 5 ways out of my neighborhood. It's pretty much true for everybody that lives out there. So what is the reason for then taxing everybody to develop yet another road and another light so that we can have one car sitting at the light instead of two? And I'm not kidding. It really is there's no additional benefit to that. So maybe the option is you shrink it down and you really put it to the benefit. And the benefit here, like it or not, is really the apartment complex, which is going to, due to the state law, which doesn't sound appropriate to me, is going to put the undue burden on the roads because of the way they're taxed for the square footage instead of the occupancy footage. So that's all it suggests. I've seen it, and I swear to God, I'm usually the only car at that light coming out of my neighborhood at 7:45 at Stone Ridge and 6th Street. That's for a light. And you want to throw another one just a half mile down or a quarter mile down at Queens Road. I don't need that exit. Nobody needs that. So I'm not getting a benefit. Nobody north of the neighborhoods are getting benefits because they experience the same thing coming the other direction. Even with Rock Chalk Park, and I go to Rock Chalk a lot, I never sit more than 2 cars back at a light. There's no traffic out there until you add I even have an apartment complex next to me on the corner. Even with them coming out, there's no traffic. So it's a lot less than you think. I would suggest putting $5 million in to develop something that adds to everybody's tax rolls is probably not the best move. So just a different way of looking at it, maybe another consideration of an option that we haven't thought about if we really do want to put the benefit to the people that are getting the benefit. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Johnson. I live at 356 North Eaton Drive in the Westwood Hills subdivision. I just felt I ought to get up here and talk to you again since I've been here for the last 2 times. I think what you've heard from almost everybody here today is that there is no benefit for anyone for Queens Road. I had suggested an email to all of you that said maybe we should abandon Queens Road and make it a sidewalk. At least, I think some people would appreciate the fact that we just make the whole road a sidewalk. You can make Fort Benton Drive a cul-de-sac. Nobody else is required to use the road. I've stood out there at the circle at Wakarusa Drive and watched cars leave and go many directions, but none of them go south on Queens Road. There's many cars that use, and I believe Sunday morning might be the only time that cars will go around the roundabout at Wakarusa Drive and go all the way south to 6th Street off Queens Road. Those folks that benefit from that are the members of the Mustard Seed Church, or whatever church that is. Morningstar Church. I knew it started with an M, thank you. Those are the only people that use the road, to my estimation, and I'm not out there every day, all day, but those are the only ones. They could easily turn on Wakarusa Drive, go either direction, and go to 6th Street, easily. I don't understand the premise that because a road is there, it has to be improved. It's not much of a road today, as we all know, probably not to be used very much because of that. Another reason it's not used is because, like everyone has expressed here, there's at least 5 or 6 different ways in and out of that area without using Queens Road. So I don't know why it can't be a sidewalk. I think almost everybody here would think that that's not a bad idea. They'd probably agree to pay for it. And compared to what we're having to pay the $5 million for a road that the premise is such that it's a road that's there, it has to be improved. Whoever decided to do that is, I'd like to know who made that decision that says, because a road is there, it needs to be improved. Why can't you say the road is there, it's so bad, let's just abandon it? It makes a lot more sense to me, and the use of that road is non-existent. And the folks on the east side of the road who back up to it might prefer a sidewalk. I really don't care what the people in the Lynx subdivision think about it.
Yes, sir. Other public comment?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Dr. Bill Miller, 5617 Chimney Rock Circle. I go by Queens Road 4 times a day. Never, ever does anybody use that road. Ever. Then we have this beautiful plan that came out this afternoon with all these schematics, and we have this wonderful drawing, and we're going to spend $5 million on a road that doesn't get used. And if we're going to lose this fight, why does it need to be 4-lane? I mean, really? 4 lanes? 1 lane would be plenty. That's all I have to say.
Commission, thank you for your time. My name is John Rockhold. I live at 1013 Branchwood. So I'm just a few hundred yards from the would-be 6th and Queens intersection. I've already got a handful of access points to 6th Street. I don't need another. I didn't buy this house about a year ago to have such easy access to 6th Street. I can get there from Stone Ridge, Congressional, and Wakarusa. And so I want to join the chorus of people asking why a traffic light there? Why we need that? So.
I'm Michelle Leeson, and I live at 709 Fox Chase Court, so I'm south of 6th Street. So I guess it's a signalization that would mostly affect me. I would just like to say I had never been down Queens Road before, so this afternoon I drove on it. And to agree with the gentleman that said there's almost no traffic on it, I drove the whole length of it and back, and I did not see one other car. And it was the middle of the afternoon, so it wasn't probably a high traffic time, but it does not seem to be a busy road. And I agree with, I would never use that stoplight. I just almost never, maybe once or twice a year, go west on 6th Street. I always am headed east, and I use Wakarusa, or when they were building the roundabout, I use Congressional Drive a lot. But I just see no benefit for me. So, thank you.
I'm Jean Carrick. I live at 312 North Eaton Drive, and this whole thing is really ludicrous. There was a period of time they were talking about a street diet on Cassold, which is a very busy street, and here you're talking about a street that has no traffic, and you want to make a boulevard. It's just ludicrous, and you're asking a couple of small neighborhoods to pay for this? It's just beyond me. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Okay, thank you all. We'll bring it back to the commission now. You want to take a,
Take a break.
Yes, please.
we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back.
Just get angry.
Okay, let's resume.
Well, as I was talking
You might
to
have to hit the gavel there, Mayor.
Okay.
Well, as I was talking to the gentleman out there, last time we met and we talked about Queens Road, I did suggest just bulldozing Queens Road between Walker's and Overland. I just want to bring it up again, see if everyone is still not interested in that, but I think that is an actual option.
I don't know that we need to go so drastic, but I would entertain a conversation about the degree to which we're building the road. I think there's a lot of public comment that addressed. There was one individual, I've lost him now, but the individual that said he had lived there since 2003.
Dr. Bill Miller.
That might have been him. Talking about the 5 access points or 4 access points, does there need to be a 5th or a 6th? And, I think that's a conversation that we need to have before we even continue down the conversation of what the benefit district looks like, is the degree to which we are building this road. I think turning it into a sidewalk might be a little bit hyperbolic, but certainly the question becomes of what all amenities do we need on the road, including stoplights? What do we need in terms of, built-in turn lanes or 2-lane road? And, frankly, I think some of the conversation where people say no one uses Queens Road may be because it's the worst road in Lawrence, Kansas. I mean, you need a new suspension if you drive down it, and certainly building a road that's worth driving on might encourage people to actually drive on it. But I do think the conversation needs to be had about to what degree that road is built.
I'm curious why it would have been the county in charge of that road. Why has that road been allowed to get so bad?
Well, I think that, Commissioner, it's been on the radar screen of the city and in our long-term plans for many years. There was an article, dating back to 2009 we were looking at today. This has been on the radar screen for a long time and in our long-term plans as we've looked at our road network, and we update those, those road plans, looking at connectivity over time.
So it's not the county's fault? We can't blame it on the county?
Well, and it's the urbanization of the area that has been causing the need for the road and the improvements on it, and have resulted in the increased traffic. But that's the way that the patterns work every time that, the community grows into those areas.
So has it been that previous commissions just have opted just not to complete it during the time that they've discussed it? Is that how that has worked?
Some other staff may be able to comment more on the history. I know that it has been on the drawing board for some time, and I know it's certainly been something that Mr. Souls has talked about for many years that we need to be looking at. The challenge, of course, is the point at which we are currently, is who pays, how is it going to get paid for, especially once the area has developed to the extent that it has. And we're in the position that we are. So this could have been one of those roads that could have been constructed at least several years back.
To what extent is the design of the road essentially mandated by our transportation plan?
I'm going to ask Scott or Chuck to comment on.
A little, and then Chuck, and yeah, it really starts out at that level, in my opinion, about identifying a street network. And so when taking the broader view, the long-term view, this is the only street that bridges over the interstate and hits Farmers Turnpike, which of course that we have a whole neighborhood planned for that area eventually. It's also been in the discussion as KDOT has talked about the interchange, the system-to-system interchange, and how folks from Lecompton will get into the city, and this being a route that others will take if changes to that interchange occur. And so this is classified as an arterial street. one that requires an arterial design, not necessarily for today, but for the longer term, and probably for today, given how much urbanization we've done on that road. And I'm in agreement that I think people will start using it once it goes from essentially dirt and gravel now to an urbanized road design.
Just to add this to what Scott said. So if Wakarusa Drive had some issue and was closed, and there was no Queens Road, then, or if there was a Queens Road, that's how people would access the Westwood Hills area. I mean, Wakarusa Drive was shut for a water main break, which we have, or whatever else. It also provides that secondary access for emergency services. They need two ways into these neighborhoods, and Wakarusa is great, but if for whatever reason they couldn't access Westwood Hills from Wakarusa, how would they get there? It would be Queens Road. The road is only a two-lane road. We are putting the bike lanes on it, and we're putting sidewalks on it. The community wants, those amenities. They want the multimodal aspects. The city at large is paying for the bike lanes. It's not going back on the benefit district. And we're paying for the pavement, we're paying for the subgrade. So that's what we pay for. We broke that all down. And we're paying for the additional width for the multi-use path, the city at large. So, this isn't, an oversized Queens Road. We've kept it minimal, one lane in each direction.
Wasn't there a center turn lane you talked about, though?
The center turn lane is up there by Fort Benton Drive, but it's on a small scale. It's two lanes, and then it widens out as it gets to the intersection, so they can make that left, so we get the people out of that way of traffic. It's not continuous because there's nowhere to turn.
Had it ever been a 4-lane? Because somebody brought that up, that it was a 4-lane.
I don't know where the 4-lane came from, unless he's thinking the 2 lanes plus the bike lanes. So just some comments.
Thank you.
I had one more question for Chuck.
Sure, go ahead.
Chuck, in the memo, it indicates that Queens Road north of 6th Street is a collector street. Now, I'm hearing it's a minor arterial.
From 6th Street to Wakarusa is collector, and Wakarusa North is the arterial. At one point, Wakarusa was supposed to, Queens Road stopped basically at that intersection, Wakarusa went north. When the links came in, Wakarusa ended up being Rock Chalk Drive. So the other thing I might want to say with respect to, how come this has taken so long? The links only came into the city limits in the last 3 years, just before they did their development. So half of that distance wasn't even in the city limits to assess. So, that's one reason why these things happen this way, because some of that was in the county and waiting for that development to happen so they could pay a lion's share of that cost.
Have you conducted any kind of traffic impact study, not only for when the road is improved, but also for those future developments that have been discussed? Do you do any projections in regard to that and how that will be impacted?
Yeah, they do. Transportation planning does some of that. In our long-range planning transportation model, I don't have any of the results or anything right here.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I couldn't cite you a figure for it, but it's been incorporated into the modeling that we do when we're laying out the entire system.
And the reason that I ask that is because, we have been asked, what are the benefits? I've never even looked at that road. How will that impact the other roads surrounding and the traffic that exists on those? Is kind of, I think, a valid question at this point. And it does sound like there will be some impact, but if we had some kind of data around that, that might be helpful.
Yeah, it's basically in our model. The one lady commented that right now all the links traffic is on Wakarusa, so one immediate improvement will be all that traffic could have another access on Queens Road, so it would alleviate some of that additional traffic in that neighborhood area. So.
Can we talk about the signal for just a second? I had a question about
Go ahead.
after a couple of folks had brought up how many signals there are on 6th Street there, I just counted them and I didn't realize there were that many. From Folks Road to George Williams Way, there will be 7 of them if we count this one. Does that seem excessive?
That was in our long-range transportation plan ever since 6th Street was built. It was planned that every quarter mile we would have access control with a signalized intersection. And when the state built the roads, it's got spaces for 2 left turn lanes at some of those roads, but one of them is not being used.
And we can't use roundabouts because it's a state highway.
It's not state highway anymore, that's ours. But it'd be a huge roundabout in the middle of 6th Street,
I
so.
like roundabouts, but not.
Yeah.
Well, you just said access controller is required, and the other way to control access besides a signal is,
Yeah, but typically not on a 4-lane road like 6th Street.
So you said it's in our plan to have traffic lights every quarter of a mile. What's the reasoning behind having them every quarter of a mile, other than the fact that other than the plan? Why?
Well, some of it's for access, some of, and it's that network, again, safety at those major intersections. If you're funneling all, quarter mile, and basically, when we do the transportation model, we load the areas with population. It runs people, to the various nodes, so we can make those determinations. Back when, this was 2006, when they did 6th Street, they ran that, and when it's all developed out, granted, it's not going to be comfortable because you're going to have a lot of traffic, but part of that's for safety, to have that quarter-mile spacing and keep people moving in a safe manner.
Chuck, I think it's fair to say that the city has tried to be very aggressive with the enforcement of access control on 6th Street, and we've been very diligent in trying to make sure that that's the case, as opposed to some of the other corridors that had access control challenges over the years that were developed in a different manner. And that's for the whole integrity of the system.
Of the system,
and
yep.
Are you talking about
and
23rd Street?
Arterials, that would be the one.
Yeah, okay. So, help me out. The light at Champions, that's right there in Bauer, by Bauer
Bauer
Farm?
Farms, Dillon's,
That's not a quarter mile, is it? Is that a quarter mile from?
I think that one came in after. It was an exception
Okay,
because
so,
it was
so that
between-
was a benefit district we did to add one
Yes.
in.
And that was because it was that big commercial, it was the Bauer
Yeah,
Farm
yeah,
commercial
right,
development.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
access control is very important.
And that, the Champion one's being paid for by all of those in the Bauer Farm district, right?
Correct.
And
And
south.
the
And
Dillon
south,
side.
and south, yes.
Because you can't do just one
Right.
side of the road, right?
Right.
Other questions for Chuck? I'd like to invite the council to come up and talk to us a little bit more about benefit, because, people are saying we don't see a benefit, and I think we need some clarity on this. Perhaps you can help us.
Maybe, do you have some specific questions? It's hard to talk about, I guess, sorry, go ahead.
I guess the question is, benefit is not determined by current usage.
Correct.
Okay, that's a hard concept for
That's
me to
correct.
understand. Can you explain that maybe in a way I can understand it?
So let me give you an example from the case law. I think that's the way I look at it. That's the way when clients come with facts and circumstances to me where we have to say, is this like this situation where the Kansas Supreme Court or the Kansas Court of Appeals has already told us this doesn't work? So there was a case involving the city of Topeka, and I'd have to pull my notes to tell you what year. I don't know that that matters. But there was a case involving the city of Topeka, and there was, it was a benefit district for a playground. And one of the properties that was in the geographic area that the city commission had decided was benefited by the playground was actually currently being used as a jail, prison. Of course, the state said, there's no way that our prisoners benefit from a playground, right? They can't get out and use it. There's no way. And the court said, I'm sorry, we can't look at the specific use of the property. It has to be whether the land itself is benefited for any purpose, regardless of how it is currently being used. Does that help? I know it sounds
got another one?
ridiculous, but that's the example. There are other examples, and the examples of benefit are sort of scattered about through the case law, and usually there are other issues at play in the cases as well. So, for example, there's another case that involves a sewer line, a benefit district for a sewer line. And the sewer line was running a fairly sizable distance. The benefit district was quite large. It was going past some area that was, apparently the topography was very uneven. It was a very rocky piece of property. And this particular property claimed, I don't think that the sewer line was going like directly to that land, maybe, a little ways from it. This particular property claimed that it was not benefited from the sewer line because of the topography, the inability to develop. In that particular instance, the court was willing to look at the facts and circumstances, the fact that the sewer line didn't go directly to serve that the sewer line would have to, reach a little, they would have to build an additional extension. In addition, the land was extraordinarily rocky and, probably physically unable to be developed for a purpose that would provide load to the sewer. And so it was arbitrary that the city chose to, or county, I don't remember which one was involved in this case, was including the property in the benefit district. I give you that example to tell you, to give you a little flavor for this facts and circumstances analysis, and that sometimes these decisions about whether there is a benefit or not are very challenging. It's not cut and dry. This is not a black and white, if you're a quarter of a mile from the road, then you benefit, and if you're a quarter of a mile and 2 feet, then you're not. It really is a facts and circumstances determination about whether that land, for any purpose at all that you could conceive it would be used for, would benefit from, in this case, the road network, or the improvement to the overall road network, or the improvement to this specific road. And so it is that sort of facts and circumstances analysis that we're going through right now, and that you all are discussing, informed by all of this information from staff about how the road network is going to be used, the overall long-term development of this area, notwithstanding the current structures that are on any of the individual pieces of property, that really have to inform, at the end of the day, your decision about whether the specific geographic boundaries are appropriate given the benefit for the construction of Queens Road in light of all the facts and circumstances.
Given the facts and circumstances, do you feel that Plan Number 1 is defensible?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
When, regarding benefits, can we assign whether a property has more benefits versus another property that's in that district? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Very good question. The case law has not addressed really any situations where a city or a county has created a benefit district and has said, for example, Property within a quarter of a mile of the improvement is benefited 100%, and property within a quarter of a mile and a half mile is benefited 50%. And so we're going to reallocate the special assessments differently according to the proximity, for example, just using that, as an example. There is no case law, there is no Attorney General's opinion on any of those things. At the end of the day, again, it is a facts and circumstances situation where the law is that the assessments need to be proportionate to the benefit that is derived by this property from this improvement. The statute does have very specific ways that it says you can levy special assessments. Per square foot is one of them. I would say it is by far the most common way that special assessments are levied, followed very closely by situations where you might be doing some internal street development, using a benefit district to pay for that, and a developer might petition or a city might decide to levy assessments equally per lot. Here that doesn't work given the vast disparity between the various tracts of land. But, to answer your specific question, there's just very little to no guidance on, I think what you're getting at, where, you'd be making some judgment calls about how the benefits might be dispersed. The one thing that is clear is that, again, you can't take into account the use of the property as you're making those calls.
Thank you. Thanks.
I have a question for, I think it would be Chuck, perhaps. Can you
Thank
bring
you.
up the option 1 map, if you're done with
Yeah.
council?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Will you bring up the option 1 map, please?
Yeah, it's not the greatest on this PowerPoint, but I can.
One of the things that I was interested in expanding the district, one reason was because of Walmart. The other reason had to do with these 2 apartment complexes. Do you have one that you can zoom in on a little better?
Hey, I learned this trick from,
Maybe if you just go back to the agenda.
is that enough?
Can you zoom in a little more?
No, it only lets me do so much.
I'm gonna come out there because I gotta point at stuff. Coming out. And still in Chet's jacket. One of the things that I wanted to talk about so we have over here this road, Stone Ridge Drive. Can everyone see me? Maybe? Yeah. But then we don't have this apartment complex that also empties out even closer to Queens Road, Hunter's Ridge. That was one of them. And then the other one had to do with, I don't remember the name, Carson Place? Yeah, who also empties out basically at Eisenhower Drive. So all of these residents are in the benefit district, but then this one isn't. So those 2 omissions, I didn't really understand.
So on Hunters Ridge, Hunters Ridge actually is the development that owns this whole section. Hunters Ridge has paid for Overland Drive and Stone Ridge, as we talked about. And on their preliminary plat, there's a note that says that that they have agreed, now I don't know if we've got a formal agreement, not to protest the benefit district for Queens, or not to protest, that they will participate in Queens Road when they start doing their phase 3 and 4, which is that east side of that.
Well, I'm talking about the currently built
And
buildings,
doesn't, at
though.
that point, aren't we assessing based on usage? When we tell someone that you will participate once you build out a certain phase? I mean, that is literally saying to someone you don't have to participate until the usage changes, correct?
Well, Yeah, I don't know that's based on usage or based on the square foot of that property. I mean, we basically
But
split
you're
that
changing
property.
the assessment of the square footage based upon
We're
the
not changing that.
specific phase.
We're not changing the assessment of the property. It's what will trigger it.
So a usage of the property triggers an assessment.
Well, the usage of all these properties at some point triggered this, the need to have Queens Road put in.
I think the current Hunter's Ridge apartment complex should be in the benefit district.
And right now, we don't have an agreement not to protest either way.
So I was looking to expand it to them, because it's not shaded blue.
It's not.
So that's what I guess confuses me. So it's definitely not where all the red private drives are, is
Right.
definitely not in the, so
It's
I
not.
wanted to add them. And then Carson Place, because the same argument I feel like we
That's
have.
not Carson Place you're pointing at, though.
What is this right here?
Carson Place is north of Eisenhower Place.
The private, this one.
This
This
area
one,
here.
where Eisenhower meets Overland. No, I was thinking of the apartments. I can't remember the name of them then.
You're talking right here
They have
where
a
I
little
got
duck.
this cursor.
Not the road, but
You're
the
not talking about Carson
apartments.
Place, the road?
Yeah, the apartments are called Carson
But
Place.
again,
The Eisenhower intersection is what I'm talking
right,
about.
again, this tract of land helped paid for congressional. And, I mean, essentially what you're doing is you're saying you're wanting them to be put into the benefit district because it's a higher intensity use.
No, not because it's of use, but if we're going to say that the people north of there are using Queens, then that same drive also empties out into the same intersection, then they theoretically should have the same reason to benefit from Queens.
Well, other than they have more than the one access, and I don't necessarily disagree. Again, you can make these arguments and go on and on. We just tried to be as consistent with what we would have seen in the past, and this is how we would have set this up before.
Right. And so my reasoning in expanding the district was not just Walmart. It was to also look at these apartment complexes that also dump out onto Overland, that they should also, I wasn't even thinking about west of Stone Ridge.
I think one of the things that I've observed happen, and I think I'm just as guilty of it as anybody, so this is not me putting blame on anyone, but I think when we go back and we look at this, and I personally found your presentation on the non-protest agreements very helpful, actually, because I had no idea that these went back that far. It seems to me like when this was originally proposed, be it 2000, 2002, 2004, 2006, 8, 15, 16, that the idea for this was pretty cut and dry. And I think that we, myself included, in an effort to try to make it more equitable, have actually muddied it. And what's ending up happening is we're sitting here and we're having like a fantasy draft here where we're adding and deleting neighborhoods, and I think that we're entering in some pretty dangerous territory here. One of the things I would like to see as an option, and I was kind of surprised it wasn't one of the options, I would like to see an option that lays out only the neighborhoods that were originally designed to pay for this, right? Option one does not do that. Option one, we've added neighborhoods that we don't have non-protest agreements. We've done something that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, really confuses me. We've added a county property, which it made sense to me in a way at the time because we were going to annex it. It was going to be city, but now we're not going to annex it. So now we're putting a city assessment on a property that is not going to exist in the city to pay for a city road that it won't technically be on because East 1000 is a county road. So we've added properties that were not originally part of the plan. And I think by doing this draft where we say, well, let's add Hunter's Ridge, but let's delete this one, I think we're muddying something that was probably pretty cut and dry with written contracts at one point. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, with the exception, I don't think there's any doubt that Hunter's Ridge, this area here, is going to benefit. And I don't think they're objecting to paying for it. I don't think there's any doubt when we're looking at the that overlaid map. Maybe I should just get it. Get the ammo line. So, I don't know, this development area here dumps out onto Eisenhower. Why wouldn't you, this is the only access they've got up to Wakarusa, or I guess back down here, but if the people across the street here are in the benefit district, why wouldn't the people on this side of the street be in the benefit district? The only other one would be, potentially, we don't have an agreement not to protest for this tract here. But again, it will develop, and these properties have paid for congressional. If we don't include them in the benefit district, and I haven't heard an objection from them, if they don't pay for Queens Road, then when they develop, the cost of the properties there will be a lot less significant, or a lot less, because they haven't had to pay for any roads other than a partial for Overland Drive. So the reason why this was set up, the option one was set up in the first place, yes, we have a majority of the agreements not to protest, but the other side of it is this is consistent with how we've done this in the past.
I guess the other response, Matthew, is that just including the properties that have these agreements does not meet the legal criteria. The legal criteria is a determination of benefit, not who signed the agreements.
Well, and Hunters Ridge would have to be in it because they are adjacent property.
Exactly.
You would have to
Yeah.
include part of
So,
Hunters Ridge.
again, the standard for inclusion in the benefit district is not did they sign an agreement or not, but rather, can we make a factual determination that's sustainable in court that there's benefit to the property?
Yeah. I think what helped me out when I went back and started looking at all this is this overlap map. And I actually went through it really carefully and looked at what properties were paying for what benefit district at what time. And after doing that to a significant degree, it started to come together as to there is a method to the madness, so to speak. And that staff, when they put together this option one at least, that they took into consideration who's been paying for what all these years. And I guess the case in point is that Congressional Drive situation, where you've very carefully said these are paying for Congressional Drive and these would be paying for Queens Road, these would pay for Wakarusa. So it's been very well laid out, I think. And I agree, Matthew, that sometimes I think we're getting it a little too muddy. And I think that's a good point. And let me finish. And then you were talking about that property that's not in the city limits.
Mm-hmm.
It's my understanding that that still might come into the city limits. It's still going to at some point come into the city limits. Is that correct, Randy?
Well, that's what I thought, but then there was.
We gave them the option. And they said what they want to do is stay in the county for now, but leave open the option of coming into the county in the future, maybe next year, maybe 5 years from now. But we gave them the option of doing one or the other. And at this point in time, for certain, I don't know, for whatever reasons, they have reasons of their own that they wanted to stay in the county now.
Well,
But they
and I
may
have a
very
cons-
well come
yeah.
into the city and want to leave that option open.
Yeah, and I have a concern about that because that means they will not be paying city taxes to maintain that road. But they'll be paying for the benefit district. So at some point, I'm pretty sure they'll be annexed at some point. That would be my guess.
I'd like to come back to your comments, Vice Mayor, about how this has been laid out and consistent over the years. And just mention the comments that we heard from the real estate agent, I think her name was Mickey Stremmel, who asked the question, why are you doing this different with Plan 2 than you've done all the others? And I think consistency is important here. So I concur. I think this fantasy draft needs to stop. I think we need to figure something out. A couple things I'm concerned about. I think we need to finance this project in accordance with our policy. And we haven't talked a lot about policy. I'd like some help from staff about what is our policy about how we pay for these kinds of projects.
We haven't talked about that. I do think that that's a good issue to discuss. And generally, it's that development will pay for itself. And so I think when we look at option one in terms of its application of the city's policy related to development, both in terms of how something is financed and who is in the benefiting, who is in a benefit district. We've tried to be as consistent as possible with how we have set those up in the past.
And the other consideration that I'm concerned about is I want to make this plan so that it can be defended without significant legal costs. I mean, we could be in litigation on something if we go too far astray, and we could be spending a lot of money. I mean, I like our attorney, but I don't want to be paying her for stuff that we don't have to. So, you know, I think those are some of the considerations. We need to think about our policy, and we need to think about how it can be defended without expending a lot of resources on the part of the city. So I think as we make this determination, those are two significant considerations that we need to consider.
The other thing I'd like to point out is when I went back and looked at some of the older memos from staff regarding how it's divided up, and I think this was back in April 16th memo, staff did break down kind of how much each type of property was going to be paying for this, and essentially it's 68% would be paid for by commercial development, and 25% by residential, and 7% by city. And the links, and I know that's garnered a lot of comments tonight, and they do. They've got a big chunk of property out there. They will actually be assessed 31% of the taxes on that. And I just looked at about the 5 biggest properties in that option 1, and altogether, over almost 60% of that will be to 5 property owners of those taxes. So, you know, I think that's important to realize. Now, one thing I would consider, again, as I go back to this overlap map, one thing I did notice is that the properties between Overland and Wakarusa, and between Queens Road and Wakarusa, those properties actually did pay for Wakarusa Road between Overland and up to Queens Road to the north. So I would consider whether or not, you know, the commission would be interested in this, is to still have that city property that is to the east of the just adjacent to Wakarusa Road, help pay for some of this benefit district, because the folks just west of there did help pay for that Wakarusa, if I'm reading that right.
Is that where the police station's going to go?
Yeah. I'd consider.
You certainly couldn't argue that we're not going to get benefit
Right, yeah.
on the city end.
I think I read that a different way. Let me pass that down again. Because Wakarusa connects to Queens through Overland. So I read it as Overland was actually what they were helping to pay. Maybe I misunderstood it.
Actually, there's two different times they paid, if you look at that.
Wakarusa, Eisenhower to Queens.
That entire Park West.
That's this,
area
right?
Paid for, along with the city, paid for that connection, or that road. Chuck, can you help me out there? Look at it a little bit.
Tell me again. I was looking to see how much that was, or that, park.
6390. Does it go west or does it go north?
Because you've already got the other one there. You've already got the other one there.
I don't know if that's still up.
It's the neighborhood where Carson Drive is, Eisenhower Place. That all paid for part of that Wakarusa, in addition to the Overland Drive.
Down here.
Are you looking at that?
Yeah, this here. What I'm looking at is this right here, Chuck. See, these guys all paid for, yeah, all this as well as this. So they've paid for this, so I don't see why the city shouldn't also help pay for that.
Will you show that on the Elmo? Thank you.
Sorry, it's all scribbly. I've been looking at it for a long time.
You work hard, I know.
Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, Commissioner Larson, what you're saying is the people shaded in green here.
Right.
Have paid, which includes the city property here, have paid for this part of this Wakarusa. They were in this benefit district. Yes, they were.
As well as Overland Drive between Wakarusa and,
As well as Overland Drive. So
Right.
you would like to include
Yes.
the city property into that benefit district?
Yes.
And just for the commission's knowledge, that would be around $290,000 to $300,000.
well, that's option 3, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Without the water.
It includes the water tower too.
Well, without the water. I don't
Without the
think-
water tower, yeah, you'd have option 3.
And I think, Vice Mayor, there is a difference between including the city property in the benefit district or increasing the city at-large contribution.
Yeah, you can
And-
do, you can do either?
You
Is
can
that
do, you can do either. And I think our suggestion might be, if there is a desire to do that, perhaps the more preferable thing would be to have the city at-large contribution be greater.
And why is that more favorable?
I think that would reduce everybody else's payment better, because if we expand out the district and include the city's property in it, the
based on the
property
square
owners
foot.
won't get as much benefit from it as if you just had a smaller district and the city just
okay.
paid into it as a city at large.
So that's consistent with our policy, though?
We've done that before.
Okay, well, that's
So
good.
so the payments would be lower if we don't include that in the benefit district, but we give
It would reduce the payments for the property owners that are in the district if we just make it at large.
Okay. Well, I mean, I want to be consistent with the policy. If that's something we've done, then that's
We
good.
have done that before.
And that's.
We've done that before.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So if that's the commission's desire, then it sounds like you're wanting to do either a modified option 1 or an option 3 without the water tower, and you want to add, it's $292,000, so if you want to do $300,000 or
Yeah.
whatever into the benefit district, and then we could proceed from there, I think, with the resolution.
I'd be interested in the modified one with the amount that would be the specials on that property.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's going to lower the property taxes for,
Yeah.
I mean,
It
the
will.
assessments for everybody.
I want it to be pretty much what the specials would be on that, and then go with the modified one.
So just 292,
Yeah.
which would
Do
have
we
down
need to craft a resolution, or do we direct staff to do that?
I'm looking
Well,
at you guys.
we need to make sure this is where everybody is, too.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's-
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the hardest thing for me is that there is no factors, there's no elements, there's no balancing tests, there's nothing, there's no algorithm to use to really look at this except for what we've done historically. So I appreciate you pointing out, what we have done historically and then further finding justification for those things so we don't just justify things because that's what we've always done. That, what I'm hearing, is probably going to be the most palatable option, as well as, acknowledging the city's role in this and doing what we can to reduce that burden.
See what else.
I think that's going to be the most financially equitable for those involved. I can't deny I have a hard time sleeping knowing that when you look at the largest contributors to this, one of them is going to be a single-family home. That bothers me. But, I don't have 3 votes there, so.
Okay, so I think we're closing in on it here. I guess I'd make the motion that we go.
You might want to have Gina help you
Sure.
formulate that motion.
That'd be great. I'll let somebody else do it if she's going to help.
Well, she's trying to explain to me, and I said, maybe you can get
If the desire of the commission is to move forward with option 1 with a city-at-large contribution, at this point, I think everyone's aware that what we're doing is calling a public hearing on the creation of a benefit district. What we're doing at this point is setting the maximum boundaries for a district that you could create, the maximum cost for a district that you could create, the maximum scope of the improvements, and the allocation of the cost. And so what I would suggest is, we're not exactly sure what the precise dollar amount is. If your desire is to get to that precise number, we could get to that later and come back to you with that at the commission meeting when you hold the public hearing. But what I would suggest is you might pick a conservatively low city at large contribution, or just approve the resolution option 1 today that doesn't have that city at large contribution, and we could always come to you at the public hearing with an additional city at large contribution, because obviously that would be more favorable to the property owners than the option 1 that's available. But if you wanted to signal that intent, you could approve resolution that's before you, option 1, with some conservative city at large contribution amount, and we could increase it to the actual dollar amount that you want to consider in October. Okay. That makes sense?
Okay, so what we're doing is we're moving approval of Resolution 7263, Option 1. Option 1. Okay, so moved.
Do we need to state our intent, though, that we?
We've said it in the meeting. What we're doing now is the formality of approving the resolution. I think everyone up here is interested in that contribution based on that amount. But for the purposes of our meeting tonight and the resolution, we're going to go with option 1.
I would prefer I would prefer vote on something that actually locks us into that commitment.
Yeah, even if we have to change the dollar amount later.
Right.
To up it, I would rather have it be official that we're
Right.
committing to that. That would be my
Okay.
preference.
Well, there's no second, so much for that motion.
I mean,
Yeah, okay. We have. We have a conversation over here. We're all kind of looking for Plan B here.
I think your comment becomes our Plan B. Your comment was that you wanted our contribution to match what that property would be.
Assessed
So,
under
I mean, we have numbers on every single other parcel of land, what it would be. I would assume we can come up with that number, and I understand wanting it to be conservatively low, but this demonstrates a commitment on
Right.
on the behalf of
And
the city. And I think that number was 292, right? Is that correct?
And if you're comfortable with, say, 290,000, and we can refine that number, and if it's 289,000, if you want to approve without having another hearing, you'll have to go to 290. But if you're comfortable with 290 or 285, I would suggest that you put that in the motion, and we'll publish with that 200 and whatever $1,000 contribution.
Okay. So somebody else give a stab at it.
I would move adoption of option 1 with the addition of a city commitment of $290,000.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Just for the general public, that will be October 2nd, your public hearing date. You'll get another notice as well. Yeah.
Another break?
I'm good.
We still all good? Everybody okay?
Are we warm?
I'm about ready to build a campfire.
Put it up 1 more degree there, Lisa. Jennifer?
If you bump it up, the heat comes on though, remember?
Well, that's because I did a 4-degree difference. Now we're doing it 1 degree by 1 degree.
Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, I was just giving you a chance to transition. My name's Tammy Bennett, Assistant Director of the Municipal Services and Operations. The item before you tonight is to receive the, can you guys hear me okay? I know it's been hard. Okay, is to receive the MSW consultant's report on downtown solid waste shared dumpster services and approve the proposed rate model for this 9.5 block area. My plan tonight is to outline the background for the issue and the recommendations. We have Cynthia Mormile here from Orlando, Florida, from MSW Consultants, and Kathy Richardson, our Solid Waste Division Manager, to answer any technical questions. For background, at the meeting on March 29th, 2018, on the City Manager Report, staff talked to you about our plan to solicit proposals, or RFPs, for a firm to analyze and refine our downtown rate structure for solid waste rate services, or for solid waste services. And this is the first phase of a larger project for an overall analysis of rates and construction of a comprehensive solid waste rate model. Let me see here. Okay, so we'll start with, there are approximately 9.5 blocks. When we talk about downtown rates, we are specifically talking about this 9.5 block area that has a very unique rate structure based on square footage and use, due to space constrictions and the need to provide shared containers in that 9.5 block area. Outside of this small area, the rates are based on the size of container and frequency of collection. So this is our spot. The model for our downtown rate area has not been revised since 1978. Although the nature and the character of businesses have changed during that time, rates have been adjusted annually. So with increases, but the foundation was never realigned, and staff has recognized there are several flaws inherent in this model, and it was not consistently applied. The model, so back to the model has been here. These are our historical rates, just to show we really do keep track of it, and we really have changed it since 1978. It was just, if we were increasing rates by 3%, then we applied that to the model as we went. So we had a total of 5 firms submit proposals. MSW Consultants was selected to develop a rate model for the downtown area with the shared dumpster service, to complete a financial analysis or financial cost of service analysis, to make recommendations for addressing the past billing errors, and to participate in some customer engagement meetings. Staff met several times with downtown businesses. We met with Downtown Lawrence Incorporated. We met with the Lawrence Restaurant Association. We held 2 public meetings on July 12th. Where city staff and MSW Consultants answered questions and heard feedback from our customers at the public meetings. So there were 2 components of the financial analysis. The first was to look at what our actual rate of revenue was compared to what it should have been under the old model, or the existing or old model, whatever you want to call that. And as we reported to the commission in March, and you can see from the report, there is a significant amount of missed revenue between our actual and our old model, what we should have billed.
Is that a yearly? What's the time period for
That's
that revenue? Monthly. Okay.
So back in March, staff identified the gaps in our processes and systems, which contributed to that error, and we put into process places that will eliminate future occurrences. So we stopped the bleeding on that part, made sure that our systems were corrected so that we did not continue to create inappropriately billed services. So the second type of, the second type of financial analysis was a full cost of service analysis to determine the cost of providing the service in the area of those 9.5 blocks. And the intent of the solid waste fees is to be a fully covered cost of service recovery. And the finding was that the direct cost of service for the area was being covered by our monthly revenue that we had charged. So while we want to make the point that while we definitely didn't do it right, we did achieve a balance between our cost and revenues in that area. So MSW Consultants have experience with all these unique situations in cities across the country. They developed a new account classification system that breaks down businesses into a variety of categories, and I've got them on the slide there, and those correlate to material generation. So we have restaurants, bar only with no food, retail, office, church, bank, There are some exceptions, and we have some residential downtown. And then the model further is broken down into general sizes. Did I get that right? Yeah, okay, it's further broken down into general sizes, small, medium, and large, and then for restaurants and bar, only no food, we add an occupancy rate component in the analysis, so that, which also correlates directly, typically, to material generation. Let me see, there we go. Okay, so this is the recommended rate structure with the assignment of categories and sizes to each class. As mentioned earlier, we did engage the businesses and organizations downtown directly and through the representative organizations. We received generally positive support for the logic, fairness, and transparency of the recommended model when we held the public meetings. We recommend the new rates be implemented November 1st in order to provide notice to the business owners. And next steps is to receive this report and approve that proposed model for the shared dumpster service. We need to post our rate model for this 9.5 block area on our website, begin the new billing under the model in November, and complete a comprehensive rate analysis, which will be our citywide, system-wide, in 2019, which was included during our budget discussions. The last item on the agenda tonight is to provide any additional direction, if you have any, on resolution of billing discrepancies. So the consultant and staff did not recommend doing the back billing, and I can try to give a succinct answer for why that is, if you want to have part of that discussion. But part of it is that the customers didn't have the information for that 9.5 blocks. Those were not published rates. We had them. They weren't on our website, and the customers did not have a way for them to know that their bill should have been something different than the bill they received. And we found that we had covered the cost of our services through the historical billing. That's kind of in a nutshell. I was trying to go fast. I knew you'd have a long night. Questions, comments? We have a brain trust here that can add any depth.
I noticed that Free State Brewery wasn't in there. I found that odd in your map.
They are out of our 9.5 block area.
Right.
They have a dedicated carved out spot in the alley, and they share service with Liberty Hall and the Raven Bookstore on their agreement.
Okay.
So it's one fee, it's their agreement. Did I get that
Okay.
right? They each have their own dumpster.
Oh, okay.
So the 9.5 blocks are shared. And so even when we say downtown in general, I want to narrow it to that 9.5 blocks because, one block off Mass, we also are able to do individual containers. So if you want less service, you can pay less price. If you need more service, you can pay.
I know that there were some businesses that were overcharged over time, and I know we weren't recommending collecting from folks that we had been under billing. But have we considered like a SOAR rate structure increase or some kind of benefit to them to make up for the amount of time that business has been there and the overcost that they've paid?
We can certainly have that discussion or that consideration. So in the code, our current code, if we have a billing error, our code says we will go back 90 days. We can go back 90 days. We can go back a year. We can make that calculation. One of our concerns was, what are we going back to? Are we going back to the rate it should have been on our old model? Are we going to the rate it should be on our new model? And that was some of the discussions we had also with the back billing. If we think there may be flaws in the model, do we go back to a flawed number?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a discussion. That's a policy discussion to have.
I think it's an option worth exploring, in my opinion, if they've been overpaying. And even if it is just 90 days, I guess, just acknowledging, that has been occurring. We know the cost associated with having a business downtown, and the commitment to that is valued, I think. And I think that this is a little broader than what we're talking about here. But have we considered for businesses downtown, and I guess with shared containers, that's difficult to assess, but facilities that are working to be zero waste, or providing some kind of incentive as far as collection around that?
We have had some pretty extensive conversations about that, and we did have some, I know Kathy's had many conversations with various business owners. The challenge is that they're all shared containers.
Right.
And what you find is that nobody thinks they generate any trash, but the containers downtown are overflowing. And so at some point, the enforcement of making sure you're not putting material into the container becomes more than the value of the discount.
Sure.
But we had a lot of those conversations. Now, the other side of that coin is because of the unique nature of that 9.5 block area, there are some really good efficiencies in that space because we are collecting them one, right down that alley. While we have to do it 6 days a week to keep the alleys clean, it's relatively efficient. So the consultant benchmarked our downtown rates with what similar businesses would be paying outside of downtown to make sure that we were recognizing those efficiencies. And in those same categories with the benchmarks, we found that to be true in almost every case. The exception was the smallest ones are at the minimum, and so they're at the minimum both places.
Thanks.
So I got a question. So the businesses that were being overcharged, was it posted on your website what they should have been charged? No. Okay. So the same way?
Same way,
Okay.
right, same situation.
So, under the old rate model, if we had been actually collecting it, we would have been exceeding our costs significantly.
Yes, we would.
So the new rate model is to simply balance,
The rate model is pegged to generate our costs, and it's got a contingency in there, a reasonable contingency, because one of the challenges of downtown is the fixed costs are relatively constant. That truck moving down those alleys is relatively constant. Generation may vary by restaurant versus retail versus office. And there will be turnover and there will be vacancies. So the contingency covers that. Did I answer your question?
yes, thank you. Other questions? Okay, so you need from us, we're receiving the report and provide direction on resolution of,
Right. We have code, under our code authority, the rate model for that downtown is at the direction of the director. My suspicion is that when we do our full rate study, it will become part of our base rates and it will all be codified. So I don't know that we have to codify it now. We will make sure that it is well publicized.
okay.
Even if not codified. And we will get it codified when we do the new rate study next year.
So we're receiving the report, I think we've done that.
Public comment.
Oh, yes, public comment. Public comment on this issue. Thank you, Leslie. Okay. Back to the commission.
I'm okay with the proposed rate model.
Okay. I am too. Everybody good with that? What direction do we want to provide on the resolution of past discrepancies?
It is difficult if it was a flawed model to begin with, to determine an appropriate amount.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a good
I'm
point.
not interested in going back.
I think if the mistake's on us, we own it, and we move on, we learn from it.
Yeah. Are we good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have the direction that you need? Thank you very much. Appreciate your work on this.
Thank you.
Okay. That's that. Next, we have Housing Trust Fund.
Here, I'll speak to this item. So as you recall, in your recent budget deliberations, you added $200,000 to the 2018 revised budget for the Housing Trust Fund. And during your discussions of that, you talked about a couple of different ideas, but staff wanted to make sure that we understood, now that that had been approved, how you wanted to proceed with the additional money that's been allocated. So we haven't talked with the Affordable Housing Advisory Board about this. They haven't had a meeting since this budget item was formally approved by the commission, but they're having a meeting next week. So we wanted to see if this is something that the commission wanted to provide direction on with regard to this particular allocation, and was there a particular desire to focus this in an area and provide a specific direction, even to an agency to carry out an existing program, or was there a desire that it be spent on something of a general nature that you would then ask the Affordable Housing Advisory Board to conduct a process to have agencies compete for those funds, or if you just wanted to ask the Affordable Housing Advisory Board for their input on it. So there's a variety of ways that you could go, but we wanted to bring it back and hear from this body what your direction was before we did anything with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, since I brought it up initially back in January, how I would like to see it addressed is sent back to the Affordable Housing Board. And I would like for the money to be used or be allocated to those type of projects that were left out of the process last fall because of the understanding at that time that it had to be spent on assets, hard assets. So the folks who had programs that were not covered in that, they could not apply for that money. So I would like to see that money earmarked or used in that manner.
So essentially what you're talking about is a grant request for proposals for the types of uses that did not qualify for the previous request for proposals.
Correct.
So non-capital.
So they're non-capital.
Mhm.
That's my understanding of it.
Yes, that's,
Okay.
essentially.
Do we have a ballpark idea of how many dollars we're talking were left out? I mean, obviously, we can't know what we didn't know,
Well,
but,
I mean, we've got $200,000.
well, no, I understand that we do, but I'm just trying to get a feel from, obviously, Vice Mayor Larson, this is something you've looked into, to kind of pinpoint this as a group that's been underserved by what we've done. I'm trying to get a feel for how big of a body of material was overlooked, so to speak.
Yeah, I haven't looked into that depth,
Okay.
and I just don't think we can. I do know we've had some past programs where those vouchers, I'm thinking of vouchers, and it's just one option of, we've provided some funding for some vouchers, and, this would be kind of covered in that area. And
Okay.
There's probably, I'm sure there's other programs.
Yeah, I guess really the point I'm trying to get, I just want to make sure that there's enough demand there that we don't say, hey, we have $200,000 for this, and then we get $75,000 worth of requests.
I appreciate that.
So I just,
Is the shelter able to go for these funds somehow? If it's a grant, competitive grant?
Again, the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, I would like to see it opened up to those programs, and if they have those programs, then, whatever program out there has the opportunity to have something that's non-capital that they couldn't apply for before.
And essentially what we'd be doing here is sending this back to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board for their advice. The decisions with regard to the, application of these funds to the projects are for this body to decide.
I am interested in emergency housing having to do with rental vouchers as well. But I don't know, I think just the Housing Authority deals with rental vouchers, I'm not sure, or if the shelter does as well. So I'd be interested to see what programs people put forward.
I think that, yeah, when a very specific program was originally mentioned, I had a hard time with that. Just cherry picking a single thing, very necessary and meaningful thing, but still not a broad opportunity, I would say. And I think that this still kind of touches on something that I was interested in, which is, letting people be creative in what they're asking for as far as these grants go, even though we're very specifically orienting them toward affordable housing. So I find that, for me, a more comfortable option to send it back to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board to kind of allow them to weigh in and kind of be in charge of that process, to come back to us for final decision.
Right. Does that provide you with the guidance that you
Yes,
need?
Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, I think having a motion on this direction would be
Okay.
helpful.
I make a motion to allocate or to send this, send this back to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board with the direction that they come up with an RFP that will allow those programs to apply for the grant, those programs that are non-capital programs. Is that enough?
The ones that were excluded from the process previously.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from the Vice Mayor, second from Commissioner Soden. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Aye. I guess that was unanimous? I didn't hear everybody, I'm sorry. I need to speak close to the mic so I can hear.
I think I said aye. Did I say aye?
It's getting late for me, I'll tell you. Okay. Commission items.
I have a question for Diane. Our janitorial service contracts, is that public information, or I had someone ask me about them? Can I just forward them the emails, or is that private?
Though the janitorial contracts would all be things that we would have in public record.
Okay.
I have a commission item. I'd just take a minute. As I understand it, tomorrow is Brian Kidney's last day with the City of Lawrence, and he served as our finance director for essentially the whole time I've been sitting up here, and I spent a lot of that time looking over my shoulder. So I just wish him well. He's not here for us to send him off, but wish him well regardless.
I'd like to second that. I have enjoyed working with Brian, and we've had a variety of different types of moments over the number of years we worked together, and I have learned a lot from him, and I appreciate what he's done for us. So, wish him well.
And I have really appreciated his patience of not getting upset when he's had to explain something to me 4 and 5 times when I sit down with him one-on-one on how the budget works. And I say that same with Casey, because she's been right in there with him. And I do appreciate the level of patience that he provided me. I appreciate that.
Agreed. I think it's a wonderful send-off that he is not here tonight, and he gets to not
Sit at home
there.
and watch the meeting?
Yeah, I'm sure
I
that's
was-
exactly
yeah,
what
I
he's
was-
doing.
I thought he'd be here. Anyway.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian, and congrats to Dave.
Yeah, congratulations,
I
Dave.
think he's gone by now.
He's
but-
gone, yeah, he's gone. I've got one thing I would like to, and I don't even know if this is appropriate. When the agendas are put together, and on items where we've had previous meetings about, and then it comes, Queens Road is a good example, where we've had several commission meetings about the subject. One thing that would be really helpful for me is if you could link the meetings, the videos of the meetings, or even just the whole meeting, actually on the current agenda. Because I go back and actually try to find the meetings, and sometimes the dates aren't in there, so it's hard to go back and find them. But if you could do that, I would be interested in making sure all the links that are there from past meetings on a particular subject.
How far back do you want to go? Because on Queens Road, there was a newspaper article from 2009 that we were looking at.
Yeah, I could just think of several different projects that have come up in the past couple months where it's like, the police stations, one of them. Going back and trying to find the one from April 17 of, the different dates and trying to remember, was it this one? I look at so many of the videos just to catch the agenda,
We'll
to
certainly
see.
make our best efforts in
Yeah,
that.
if you
I
could.
know for these complicated ones, sometimes we have done those timelines, or
Yeah.
we have all that.
And you actually
So-
did it a little bit for Queens Road, and that was very helpful to be able just to, instead of having to look through all of them.
Certainly.
Okay, other commission items.
I thought this was in the city manager's report about the, it might have been a future item, but just to bring up, I noticed that we'll be talking about the downtown camera policy, but we're not supposed to be talking about the body camera policy, and I think that we should have some input on when it's developed. I read in the newspaper that the Department of Justice will be reviewing it, so that's great, but I think it's important as representatives of the people to have a say into the body camera policy.
Any other commission items?
Does anyone else agree with that?
I hadn't thought about it, actually. I'd have to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see us needing to have some input. I'm just not, I'd have to, again, think about that.
Do you have any input on that?
I don't, I'm curious about, internal policy versus external policy, and best practices, and having the DOJ reviewing that, obviously, I think goes a long way. So yeah, I'm just curious more about process and how we generally tend to handle internal and external policy. We are policy setters, but we don't handle, HR policy or other policies like that. So how can we do that effectively and without causing this to take longer? Because it has taken an unexceptionally long time, in my opinion. So I do want to see it move, and I would rather have it as a check on ensuring that it gets done in a timely manner than us setting a policy about which we have no expertise. Having input is different, right? And so that's my input on your comment. I appreciate it.
Sure. Do you have any thoughts on that, Matthew?
I don't.
Yeah. Other commission items? Okay. City manager's report.
Couple of items here. We wanted to highlight a couple of things upcoming on your September 18th agenda, just for the public's benefit. There will be two items that have will probably be of interest to the public. One is a continuing discussion about the short-term residential property code, or how the city regulates properties like Airbnbs, and this will be a continuation of that discussion. And then also International Property Maintenance Code, we're looking at making some updates, and we would draw the attention to are proposing some new regulations related to the parking and storage of recreational vehicles and trailers on private property. So we know that there will be some interest in that from the community, and just want to provide some folks some advance notice about that. The July building permit report is there. We continue to have strong construction activity in the community. The Moody's Investor Service annual report is attached there for your information, and I just wanted to point out that we continue our AA1 rating, and the comment that the AA1 rating that the City of Lawrence has is stronger than the U.S. cities median of AA3. So we continue to be in a good position related to that credit agency. There have been a couple of questions, and I think an article recently related to the city's percent for art policy, so we wanted to follow up on that and provide you all a link to that policy, and make a comment that in the policy, it does provide for the allocation of up to 2% of certain projects for Percent for Art. And so there is a sizable amount in the 2019 budget related to Percent for Art items, $422,000 to be exact, that relate to several capital projects, the East Lawrence Recreation Center renovation, the police facility, and the multimodal transit facility. And Tom just wanted to point out on this that while the policy enables up to 2%, and we budgeted that amount, that it doesn't mean that the entire amount of that budget allocation has to be spent, that it could be something less. But the Lawrence Cultural Arts Commission then works with subcommittees per the resolution to recommend selection and placement of art with all these projects. The Planning and Development Services staff has provided the city's July 2018 population estimate, and that is showing just a little over 100,000 in population. And so while this isn't the official census estimate, it is one that we internally use for a lot of our planning that we update every year. The Jayhawk watershed stormwater concerns, these are a continuation of some of the responses to the questions raised by Ms. Geisler and Ms. Merriman related to the Jayhawk watershed. And you have an attached memo there that responds to the questions that were at the last meeting, with the exception of one that we're still working on the response to. So as soon as we have the answer to that, we'll be providing that on a future city manager's report. And then we wanted to highlight for you, the Kansas League of Municipalities has its upcoming annual conference, October 6th to the 8th in Topeka. This is a great opportunity for local elected officials and appointed officials to hear things going on in the state and in some of the cutting edge activities and networking and things like that related to our work. And a couple highlights for you on the future agendas items is the next meeting that we have next week is actually a regular commission meeting and a work session meeting. We have one main item there, which is receiving and adopting the housing study. And I did want to point out that we actually have that housing study draft linked to that report, and we have shared it with the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. They'll be discussing that at their meeting too next week. So just to give you a little extra time to be reading that. On the 18th, then, as I mentioned, we have the property maintenance code items and the short-term rental issue that I mentioned, and also a cross-connection control certification program. So this is backflow prevention devices that people have on irrigation systems that we'll be talking about. And then, of course, in October, we have the citizen survey related to the police department, presentation from the consultant, and then the Queens Road Benefit District item that you had set this evening. And then on future work sessions, again, the housing study, they'll be next week. And then a fairly involved meeting in October the 9th with Tobacco 21 and the discussion of marijuana ordinance. And then in November, we've slated the fire medical agreement with Douglas County and a discussion on that with the commission and downtown camera policy.
Thank you.
Appreciate you filling in, Diane.
My pleasure.
Public comment on the city manager's report. Okay. Meeting list. Anything on the meeting list? Okay. I'd entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Herbert, second Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much.